Orders of the day, ordre du jour.
Government orders, government bills, commons. Resuming debate at third reading of Bill C3, an act to amend the Judges Act and the Criminal Code.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat. The honourable member for Parry Sound, Muskoka. No? One second. Essex, the honourable member for Essex.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair or Madam Speaker. I'm sorry. Way too many committee meetings, I suppose. I really want to say thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to C3 in this House. A piece of legislation that's absolutely vital not only for today, but for the future on so many fronts. But before I do that, Madam Chair, I'd really like to make a huge recognition of a life lost yesterday. A life lost on Manitoulin Island, an OPP officer. 28 years from the Little Current dispatch, responded to a call only to not be able to go home and see his family. Madam Speaker, I have first cousins that serve on the OPP. One of them, in fact, ironically, is the captain of the Chris D. Lewis OPP boat in my riding. And yes, I get asked a lot if I indeed named that boat. And the truth of the matter is I did not, because I'm Chris B. Lewis. But Madam Speaker, not to take away Constable Mark Kovig, sir, thank you for your service to not only Ontario, but to Canada. Madam Speaker, my parents, I actually got a text from my mother last night. She's in Silverwater with my father. And I know I'm not speaking to C3, but this is very important. She sent me a text and said, what's going on in Gore Bay? I said, Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. But this is our family cottage, a cottage of 23 years. And to find when such hurt happens on the largest freshwater island in the world and the smallest community, quite frankly, is astonishing, and it's sad. So my heart goes out to the family of Constable Hovig and to all the residents of Manitoulin Island. I know that he's going to be dearly missed, and I thank him very much for his service. And I would ask this House to please join me just for 20 seconds of thought for the Constable, because this is absolutely astonishing. And I will take 20 seconds of my time, Madam Chair, if it's okay, to remember him. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Or Madam Speaker.
Thank the honourable member. I have the riding of Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing, and I extend my deepest condolences to Mark's wife, Leanne, and her children, as well as to all of the OPP colleagues, both currently serving and past, because we know that it also affects everyone, and to the community of Manitoulin Island, because although he served in the Little Current detachment, he served all of Manitoulin and the area. So I do appreciate the honourable member's comments. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Essex.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate that very much as well. And again, our hearts are with you and all the members of Manitoulin. So I've been reflecting on Bill C3 and what an honor it is to stand in this House, in this place. At the same time, I guess at some point in time, I look at it from a different angle and I say, why do I have the right to stand in this House and speak to C3? So it's not because I sit on the Justice Committee. It's not because my office overlooks the Supreme Court of Canada. It's because I was duly elected to come to this place to represent all of my constituents. But we're going to talk about a little bit of history here, Madam Speaker. It kind of goes like this. But before I go there, I'm going to start with this. Madam Speaker, I'm a bit of a political geek, I suppose. And along my path of trying to become I'm going to suggest a politician, Madam Chair, I used to go on the various parties' websites and look at each individual MP and always wonder, always just be in absolute awe and dive into what they're doing and what they're saying. And one person that I always resonated with was Rona Ambrose. For some reason, she really stuck with me. And I guess it took till about last night for me to really understand why that was. Now, unfortunately, I haven't had an opportunity yet to meet Mrs. Ambrose, and I hope at some point in time I do. So this is kind of a hail call to her. I would love to talk to her at some point in time. And what better platform than to use in the House? But Madam Speaker, she was so far ahead of her time on this legislation. Unfortunately, as we all know, it's been introduced twice. It's failed twice. Now it's being introduced for the third time. And I believe it to be a fair statement, a true statement, that it's going to get unanimous consent throughout this House. And I don't want to speak for anyone, Madam Speaker, but I believe that to be the case. But I think we really have to celebrate the groundbreaking achievements that she made here with this legislation. So I want to thank Ms. Ambrose very much for her leadership on this legislation. And I could never be prouder to stand here in this place and speak to that. Madam Chair, I'm fortunate I got 20 minutes because I could probably talk for 2 hours. Or more. Madam Chair, I guess I'm going to start by saying this. First and foremost, there's 4 women in my life, 4 females in my life, I have to watch my language here, that have been incredibly influential to me along the way on my path to where I stand here today, proud and excited to be a Canadian. First and foremost is my mother. My mother allowed me opportunity. She allowed me the gift of being myself. She allowed me the gift of openness, truthfulness, not being pushed into a corner. She allowed me to smile. She allowed me to make my own decisions without fault. And for that, I'll always be faithful. And the second person that I admire, and this is a real slippery slope here, is my lovely wife, Allison. So it always goes my mother and then my wife, because my mom's the one that's going to send me a text afterwards, by the way. The second one is my wife, Allison, of coming up on 22 years. A woman that, again, allows me to do what she knows that I believe is right for Canada and is right for this world. And she gives me the freedom. She gives me the longest dog leash ever to let me come to Ottawa and do what's right absolutely without any question. The third woman, Madam Speaker, which is why I'm so passionate about C3 today, is my daughter, Faith. My daughter, Faith, is 17 years old. She's going to graduate, likely with honors, this year, Madam Speaker, from grade 12, and her ambition in life, all she wants to do is be a veterinarian. Now, notwithstanding the fact that it's tougher to become a veterinarian in Canada than it is a general practitioner to get into the school, The very fact is, I don't care what she wants to do, but I'm awfully proud of her. The fourth person, Madam Speaker. Yesterday morning, I was on a Zoom call. I'm going to back up a little tiny bit here. About a year ago, or a year and a half ago, when I was running to become a member of Parliament, I went to a school in a place called Essex, which is in my riding, and I spoke to a grade 5 class. And when I got there with my handler, so to speak, we had to go to the principal's office. And who greeted me other than this amazing young woman? Her name is Jade. She's about yay tall and the most bubbly, energetic, fantastic, positive attitude you could ever imagine. I'm telling you, you've never met anybody like this. And by the way, I'm happy that she's as young as she is, because she could run for my spot and probably beat me, okay? She is just fantastic, and there's no rules with her. So yesterday, because I haven't got a chance to talk to Jade as of late, yesterday I'd asked her teacher from last year if we could please set up a Zoom call, and we did. And not only did I get to speak to Jade for about 20 minutes, I also got to speak to the rest of the class. Now, Madam Speaker, why am I saying this? Well, first and foremost, every day that we wake up, we learn something new. We can learn something new. And I got to tell you, if I don't say this, it would be disjustice to Jade. I said, Jade, tell me something exciting. What do you want to do? And here I'm thinking she wants to be the Prime Minister of Canada. She wants to, I don't know what she wants to do. But you got to understand, this beautiful, beautiful young lady is just fantastic and full of passion for life. And she said, I want to work in a museum. I said, in a museum? Well, that's neat. I said, tell me something that I don't know. She said, well, I know. And she's got her hand up. I love it. And she said, I bet you don't know what a pangolin is. I said, a penguin? A pangolin. I said, I've never heard of pangolin in my life. And she said, well, Mr. Lewis, it's just an aardvark with a whole bunch of scales on them, and they're really pointy so nothing can get at it. Went, wow. Now, her teacher from last year, Mrs. Armstrong, was an enormous role model for that young woman, and I thank Mrs. Armstrong enormously for what she's done. But I'm telling you, Jade is the reason that I stand in this House so proudly, and I know we have to fight going forward. So, Madam Speaker, why do I bring up these stories? Why do I bring up the women? Because it is absolutely vital that we protect them. So let's just suggest for a moment, Madam Speaker, that my mother, or my wife, or my daughter, or Jade, along this path, would have been assaulted. I don't believe any of them to ever have been assaulted. But in the event that they did, how would that have impacted my life? How would that have changed? How would that have steered the ship in my life? Because they didn't get due justice. And so because of that, again, Madam Speaker, I'm incredibly proud to stand here and celebrate not only my mentors, but I'm sure the rest of this House has many mentors as well. Madam Speaker, I had a Zoom meeting back on October the 27th with an amazing woman, Marian Overholt. And we discussed the training for judges on sexual assault cases. And I'm going to read through a few of these points. So first and foremost, Madam Speaker, I was a firefighter for 7.5 years. And we responded to all types of calls, be it a fire, be it a heart attack. But actually, we responded at some point in time when the ambulance couldn't get there quick enough to assault victims. Remember one very dearly that I won't give details to, but I recall that like it was yesterday. But I didn't realize the people that were behind this, the people that, so as a firefighter, you go there, you put the fire out, and you go home to your family. But it continues on. And I didn't realize that until after this discussion with Mrs. Overholt. So she's actually appeared before the Justice Committee in the past. She has 37 years of practice. She's a community legal aid. She actually works out of the local OPP detachment. She goes on to talk about, in the past, victims have shied away from pressing charges because they do not think that they would be believed. Incredibly powerful statement. So if I go back to the four main ladies in my life, they did not believe that they would be believed. And those four ladies believe. Settings involving no witnesses and often without clear evidence. The narrow focus then becomes about credibility. Often the victim will not testify, but the complainant will, potentially widening the gap. So what does that mean? Well, to me, what it means is this. I'm going to go back to the basics here. Next year, I will proudly see my daughter off, hopefully, to university somewhere, be it Calgary, be it Guelph, or be it the States if COVID ever gets held under caps here. And I believe that she needs the right, she needs the confidence, she needs the belief that if something happens to her, she has every right in the world to come forward and have a voice and not feel victimized, but know that the courts and the justice will do their due diligence for her. She goes on to say, again, back to my meeting on October the 27th, Crown prosecutors don't actually present the victim, they represent the Crown, whereas the defense lawyer is there for the defendant. Well, that's an interesting conversation. The next time that I'm told that I'm guilty and or I'm a victim, I would certainly think that the Crown would go the other way, would actually reach out to the victim, especially when they don't necessarily have a voice. She goes on to say, the burden of proof is high, guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Victims will often describe the trial was worse than the assault. So what does that mean? Well, so we had some great discussion about this. So because it takes so long to get to the courts, so if somebody is victimized tomorrow, blessed that they aren't, it can take years, Madam Speaker, to get to the courts. And by the time it gets to the courts, the healing process, the very inner, the healing process of the victim is starting to, I'm going to suggest so rudely, at least put a scab on it. And the very moment that it goes back to the courts, they have to look at the victim, or have to look at the defendant in the eye. They have to listen to the testimony. They peel the scab off, they peel the Band-Aid off, and they have to live through, again, what they've already been through years prior. Madam Speaker, that is deplorable, and that is wrong. If I may, Madam Speaker, 2 minutes left? Thank you. Madam Speaker, I'm going to speak very, very quickly about training. So, Madam Speaker, as I mentioned, I was in the fire department. I trained and trained and trained, be it CPR, be it WHMIS, high-angle rescue ropes. When I was in my personal business, I had to do confined space, all kinds of training. And this upcoming week, Madam Speaker, as a member of Parliament, I am taking harassment training. My point is this, Madam Speaker. Nobody is above the law. Nobody. And shouldn't be. And if members of Parliament are good enough to do training, then surely our judges are fine to do this training. Why do I say that? Well, nobody is perfect. And why not? And I don't really call it training as much as I call it tools in the tool chest. So let's have this open discussion about if there's a case in Ontario, what's happening in BC? If there's a case in BC, what's happening in Newfoundland? And let those judges integrate and talk about this, because quite frankly, Madam Speaker, this is a much, much larger discussion. But Madam Speaker, I would wrap up with this, that again, I really want to thank Mrs. Ambrose for bringing this legislation forward. I will be proud, very, very proud and honored to vote in favor of Bill C-3. And thank you very much for your time, Madam Speaker. I appreciate it.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill C-3 is all about training of judges related to sexual assaults. And it really is applicable to federally appointed judges. The member made reference to being proud of his daughter. You know, yesterday, my daughter, who happens to be an MLA in the province of Manitoba, introduced Bill 215. Bill 215 is known as the Provincial Court Amendment Act. It, in essence, does the very same thing that Bill C-3 does here for federal appointed judges. In order for us as a society to be able to move even further on this issue, we need provincial legislatures and territorial legislatures to adopt similar legislation. So as he is proud of his daughter, I too am proud of my daughter. And I would encourage the Manitoba legislature to do what the House of Commons here has done. Recognized a good idea that was brought forward by a Conservative interim leader. And it will be supported unanimously here. Would he recommend that the Manitoba legislature do likewise?
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and through you to the Honourable Member, and thank you so much for the question. I would recommend that I won't recommend because I'm not part of the Manitoba legislature, but by all means, this is absolutely vital. And by the way, Madam Speaker, through you again to my Honourable Member, I can only appreciate how proud you are of your daughter, and rightly so, sir. Sorry, his daughter, my bad. But no, I think we have to look at this on a very national scale. I think it's absolutely vital that in each region, in each province, we continue to push this forward to protect the most vulnerable and to make sure that they are the most vulnerable are the ones that have a voice at the table when it goes to the courts. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Honourable député de Abitibi-Témiscamingue.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Honestly, I think that we don't see enough speeches that are feminist in nature, like the one we just heard, and we need more like that, because I think these issues could be put forth. We will achieve greater equality when more people like him will speak to issues like this. So I thank him very much for his speech today. I listened to it very carefully, and I'd like to ask him what types of training he would provide to the judges, what would he like to see in the training to make judges aware of the situation and to provide some potential approaches for further action.
Madam Speaker, and through you to the Honourable Member, and thank you very much for your comments. Sir, specific to the training, again, as I wrapped up, my final point there was, I think the biggest thing is we need the training to not only dive into the details, but to make sure that we have an open communication across the country. Because again, what happens in BC, Ontario justices may not know. And if there's an experience, if we don't have to reinvent the wheel, then that open line of dialogue needs to happen. But again, Madam Speaker, through you, it is absolutely vital and will always be vital that the victims have a true voice at the table and they are heard and they believe that they can bring their issues forward, Madam Speaker, and not feel as though their voice is left out. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his comments. I know that he acknowledged the re-victimization of women who have experienced sexual assault when they seek justice. I'm wondering if the member also agrees that in addition to women issues that women have experienced injustice, if it isn't compounded further for Indigenous and BIPOC women who often feel or experience the dual re-victimization based not just only on their gender, but also on their identity.
The honourable member for Essex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through to you, thank you so much to the honourable member for the question. I never thought I'd be able to speak for so long, at 20 minutes, and not even get to some my other points. Madam Speaker, back in my other days, I actually flew into 2 Indigenous reserves in northern Manitoba. And I will tell you that one of the elders' homes that I went to, there was actually a victim in that home. So I have been actually speaking about, through Bill C-7, disabilities, specific to disabilities with our Indigenous peoples, and I would suggest strongly that yes, this does not just stop here in this House. This goes across Canada, across all peoples, be it the Indigenous or people of color. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
And thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And to the member, I really, really appreciated your speech. You know, this really is about young women and girls and making sure that as we grow and generations grow, that we understand that women are not women are not an object. And I really appreciate the words that you have. And I know that this member will definitely always defend women's rights when it comes to their safety and security. I just wonder if the member could continue on with some of his thoughts on how we can do more than just, teaching our judges, but what we could possibly do in the education system or dealing with young boys and girls and having them understand their own sexuality as well as respecting others. And if he has any thoughts on that. Thank you.
The honourable member for Essex.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to my honourable member, and thank you again for the question. So, yes, absolutely. I think it needs to start long before it ever gets to the training for the judges. It needs to happen in our schools. I think to some extent, the discussion has already started. But has it gone far enough? I have to question if it has, because if a young lady comes out of grade 8 going into grade 9, well, that's one thing. But when they come out of grade 12 and are shipped off, sent to university on their own will, and something happens there, which is much more likely, have we told them that it's okay to stand up for yourself? Have we told them, both women and men, that it's okay to tell the story? And that it's okay, and you will be trusted and you will be believed by our court system. So yes, there's a lot more that needs to be done within our school system for sure. Madam Chair, through you to the honourable member, but I believe to some extent it started. I can only say that, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, I'm sorry, because I've got a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 17-year-old at home. So I just watched them come through the school system. And I know that some of the discussions happen, but much more needs to be done. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The honourable member for Cariboo Prince George. The honourable member for Cariboo Prince George?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
I want to thank my my honorable colleague for his speech. You know, I've listened throughout the week with respect to these speeches. I know that there's been some very heartfelt stories from right across all sides of this House, and you know, I can't help but think that this legislation is going to, as we talk about in mental health and the stigma associated with mental health and mental illness, mental injury, that this bill C3 will help break the stigma and allow people to come forward more. And I think one of our colleagues, and forgive me, I can't remember her riding. She is the chair of my committee, the PROC committee, but she gave a very impactful testimony of 3 sisters from my riding, the Puni sisters, that were able to come forward and give their testimony and long-standing issue of abuse. But to our honourable colleague, through you, I'm wondering if he could expand on how this will break the stigma, help break the stigma. Obviously not everything, but break a critical barrier for those coming forward.
The honourable member for Essex, a brief answer, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to get this right before the day's done. Madam Speaker, through you, to my honourable colleague, and listen, I really want to thank him for the incredible work that he's done on the mental health file. He is an absolute ambassador to that, and he's personally reached out to me. To his point, yes, much more needs to be done. Absolutely it does. I think that collectively, because this House is all agreeing that this is a vital issue, we're going to get this right. We're going to make this right. Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that. I will be sharing my time, actually, with the member for Saanich Gulf Islands. As I prepared to talk today about this Bill C3, I couldn't help, of course, like many of us, I'm sure, think back about what we've experienced and learned over the course of our lives. And of course, I'm firmly ensconced in white, middle-aged, white guy now zone. But I started out in public life, of course, really as quite a young guy. I was 21 when I was first elected to Huntsville Town Council and the Muskoka Regional Council, and I didn't know anything. I was fairly clueless. And needed to learn an awful lot. And among the first things I learned about was the needs that exist in my community. There's a perception, of course, of Muskoka as a playground of the rich and the famous, and that everything is rainbows and sunshine. And yet the reality, of course, in a place like Muskoka, and certainly the entire part of my riding, Parry Sound and Muskoka, is that the people who live and work in these communities year-round, their median income is about 20% lower than the provincial average. There are struggles. There's a housing crisis. And there are a lot of social problems that I certainly, as a kid, tended to think really only existed in places like big cities. I was actually in the home of a good friend, now a former mayor, but he wasn't mayor then, but his name is Claude Doughty from Huntsville. He was a dentist in town and left his dental practice to become a developer, and he's built lots of wonderful things. His wife, Kim Doughty, is one of the most dynamic women I've ever known. We were sitting in his house, and he lives in a beautiful home overlooking Fairy Lake. It's gorgeous, absolutely stunning place. We were sipping on a Heineken and thinking that, wasn't this all wonderful, and we've got great things going on in our town. And Claude's wife, Kim, came home, and she was clearly upset. She'd had a difficult day, and I knew that she had worked at that time with Muskoka Victim Services. And so I asked her what happened today. And she proceeded to tell me some of the most tragic and heart-wrenching stories that I'd ever heard. And what struck me more than anything was that these situations that she described, these traumas, this fear, this anxiety that existed literally blocks away from this home in the lap of luxury overlooking Fairy Lake. Claude and I were both really quite distraught by what we heard and decided that we needed to do something. And so we got to work. I immediately spoke with the executive director of Muskoka Women's Advocacy Group, which runs, at that time, ran a shelter for women in Bracebridge called Interval House, because we recognized that we needed to do more for North Muskoka and certainly into the Parry Sound area. And so with Claude's building expertise, he donated a piece of land. We started a campaign that consumed the community. And we were able to build a 6-room shelter and 10-unit transitional housing facility for women escaping violence in their own home. As that project started, I got to know an awful lot more people in the social service industry and business in our area. And one of the other amazing people I met through the process of starting this was a woman by the name of Carolyn Bray. Carolyn Bray was the executive director of the YWCA of Muskoka. They called it the Y Without Walls. It wasn't about gyms, it was about programs and supporting women and girls. And I learned a lot from Carolyn about the issue of sexual violence and how, yes, there are most certainly victims, but she recognized the importance of not just supporting women and girls, but in helping little boys who may have grown up in a circumstance where they saw domestic violence. They saw the way their father treated their mother. And because of their own lack of understanding, their own fears, their own anxiety, their own mental health, model the same behavior when they become intimate partners. Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms says that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. Security. This word means without care, without anxiety. Sadly, we know not all Canadians experience security. Sexual assault is the only violent crime in Canada that is not declining. 67% of Canadians know a woman who has experienced sexual violence. Roughly 6,000 women and children sleep in shelters on any given night in our country. Despite these numbers, only 5% of sexual assaults were reported to police in 2014. And we know that it's because of the fear. We've heard people talk about how women are afraid to approach the justice system for fear of being re-victimized and reliving the pain of the experience. Madam Speaker, I've had the privilege of growing up and learning in public life into this role. And as shocking as what I heard those many years ago in the lovely home of Mr. Doughty, it's dismaying, of course, that we are still here talking about these things and that we haven't solved these problems. And so, to me, Bill C-3 is an important next step. It's really a minor next step. We have much, much more work to do, Madam Speaker. I am honored that I have the opportunity to be here to speak in favor of this bill. I'm really thrilled as a new member of Parliament who sees how oftentimes seemingly dysfunctional this place can be and how it takes forever to get anything done, that everybody gets the importance of this bill and of supporting women and ensuring that all women feel the same security and liberty that I feel. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I look forward to any questions.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate my colleague's intervention today. I really was listening attentively when he talked about Interval House and the work that he and his community had done to set that up. My mother worked for, back in the early 90s, for Interval House in Kingston for quite a while, and you really got to see some of the hardships that women were facing coming from abusive relationships, and the work that Interval House could do to actually significantly change lives. I'm wondering, I know he talked about creating Interval House. Can you talk a little bit about the results that came as a result of having that Interval House in his community?
The honourable member for Parry Sound.
I want to thank the honourable member for Kingston and the Islands for the question, because it's something that I did want to speak to. It's had a tremendous impact. And I can share a quick story that was in the newspaper about a woman who had lived in a 17-year abusive situation with her ex-husband. She left, she wound up in another one in North Bay, and she left, and she made it to Chrysalis House in Huntsville, which is the facility that we had built. And she didn't have bruises, it wasn't a recent event, and yet she made it to Chrysalis House. She was scared. She didn't know if they would accept her. She was offered a place to stay that was warm, safe, and without judgment. And she said it was a feeling she hadn't known in 22 years, if you can imagine. She's doing really well. She stayed in the shelter. She's able to move into the transitional apartment units next door where there was support. She could get her life back together. She could get a job. She's doing really well. And I'm really proud of my role in playing to get that place built.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Berthier-Maskinongé. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. I think all of my colleagues would agree that this is a bill of crucial importance. It's very important for the protection of victims and improvement of our justice system. I'd like to hear my colleague perhaps reassure all of us, including Canadians, because there are some critics who say that this bill could perhaps make the court system less independent. Quite the opposite, I think. The more training, the better, and it might undo some myths or stereotypes. So I'd like to hear what my colleague has to say about that. Thank you.
Parry-Sound Muskoka.
I appreciate the question, and I think it's an important point to make that you can't have too much education, I guess. There's no question that there are biases, there are myths, there are misunderstandings, and as a society we evolve, and it's important for all of us to evolve along with it. And so I would just simply say that a little more education is always a good thing.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to once again thank my honourable colleague for his comments. He spoke a lot about domestic violence, but we know that many women who experience violence aren't necessarily in a domestic dispute. In fact, if you look at the findings of the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls, many women experience violence as a result of, for example, not having proper housing. Not having safe places to stay. And I really, am thankful for the work he's done to find safe spaces for women. I'm wondering if, in addition to training around issues that women face in courts, if he also thinks that it's important to include in that training issues of systemic racism and poverty and how that impacts women seeking justice who have experienced sexual violence.
The honourable member for Parry-Sound Muskoka, a brief answer, please.
I'd like to thank my colleague for the question, and it's a completely important and accurate point, and it's one of the reasons why I'm pleased that one of the amendments that was made in committee is to actually include training related to systemic racism and bias that exists in our society. So I'm glad that that's in there, and we could talk about housing for many more hours, but that's one of the other reasons I came here, to talk about housing. So I appreciate your question.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to start by acknowledging that I'm speaking today from the traditional territory of the Wasanic Nation. I raise my hands to you, Haishkasiam. Thank you for the opportunity, and all honor to my colleagues gathered here. I also want to specifically thank the honourable member for Parry-Sound Muskoka and the Conservative Caucus for organizing this morning's speeches so as to allow me an opportunity to speak to the bill. highlighting right from the beginning what I think will be a theme for what I want to say at this point about Bill C-3, which is starting from a vantage point of nonpartisanship. Generous, again, for the official opposition to grant a speaking slot this morning, as we are coming together to support good legislation. We, of course, have referenced many times that the origin of this legislation is entirely nonpartisan in that, as we all know, it was put forward by Rona Ambrose. It's an extremely important piece of legislation. She put it forward when she was interim leader of the Conservative Party, and it did pass Parliament, and as we all know, it got bogged down in the Senate. To see it come back here now as a government piece of legislation, in other words, Liberal legislation, is extremely heartening. It is important legislation. I want to emphasize a couple of things, though, in today's presentation to let the Canadian public know the ways in which the bill has been improved from when it was first tabled and improved again in a spirit of nonpartisanship. The essence of the bill, of course, is found in many decisions that enraged citizens of Canada, men and women, and non-binary people who looked at this and said, what on earth? How can we have judges make pronunciations from the bench that, and of course, famously, and I've spoken to this already in the House, the judge who said, why didn't the victim keep her knees together? Judges who make assumptions against the interests of victims, an assumption that, well, a woman who'd been sexually assaulted wouldn't have responded that way, would she? Wouldn't you do the following thing so that the judges, without any training, imagine what they might do in similar circumstances and then hold that as evidence against the veracity of a victim's claim? These things were what gave rise to the bill. But I can say now, and the honourable member for Winnipeg Centre just made this point, much of what's in this legislation could have been taken from a report that wasn't written at the point that Rona Ambrose entered this bill and put it forward as a private member's bill. It wasn't written because the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry had not reported. But I would point the members to themes of 16, 17, 18, and Part 3 of the report of the inquiry in Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, pointing to these very factors that judges and the judicial system don't understand, don't recognize, don't take the sexual assault and the high levels of violence against Indigenous women, don't take it seriously, don't understand that they need to learn more. That is spoken to in this bill. And we also, of course, have been at the point the bill came forward, very occupied as a society with questions of violence against racialized people, what's now the acronym BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, who are more at risk of violence and more at risk in disproportionate numbers of being jailed for crimes. So I wanted to, again, this is a nonpartisan observation, but the bill is improved through the work that was done in committee. So whereas I initially, and I apologize to people who I took by surprise, thought we all agree on this bill, let's move it a little faster. The time in committee was well spent. And the existence of a Black Parliamentary Caucus is relatively new. Formed as the world was responding to the horrors of racism and violence by police, and crystallized with the murder of George Floyd. There is now a Black Parliamentary Caucus, and that caucus is multi-party, and took it upon itself to say, can't this bill for training for judges to understand how women experience sexual violence and how they should receive evidence and how they should recognize that women are re-traumatized by this experience? Well, can't we use this training opportunity to broaden what judges learn? So for Canadians watching this, the bill now includes language that the continuing education for judges on matters related to sexual assault and social context now include the specific language, quote, which includes systemic racism and systemic discrimination. Again, a multi-party response and a way to improve the legislation. And I particularly am so proud of the work of the honourable member for Fredericton, who is a member of the Green Caucus. And this amendment was accepted. Obviously, I say obviously, many Canadians wouldn't know that as a party with fewer than 12 members of Parliament, Green Party MPs are not allowed to sit on committees. But we do have this new process, new since Stephen Harper, that you can look at it as an opportunity, or you can look at it that we are compelled to be at clause by clause in committee. But it's quite worthwhile when an amendment gets passed. And in this case, for her work, the honourable member for Fredericton is responsible for this amendment in the law, which in looking at the group of people who advise on the content of the training judges receive, that language now includes Indigenous leaders and representatives of Indigenous communities. That's a quote from the legislation with the new amendment, thanks to the honourable member for Fredericton. This legislation shows what we can do when we rise to our best selves, when we decide that this issue is not partisan, when we embrace what my mother raised me to believe, which is you can accomplish anything you want if you don't care who gets the credit. In this process, credit to everyone involved. Thank you again to the Honourable Rona Ambrose for bringing this forward. Thank you to the Honourable Minister of Justice, to the current government for bringing it back to us as government legislation. Thanks to everyone who laid a single hand. There are many fingerprints on this legislation, and they are all helpful. They are healing. They are feminist. They are racialized, and they understand that we must do better. This legislation is a first step. We must do more to ensure proper services for women who've been victims of sexual violence. I commend to members who are looking for a model for their own community that in Victoria, BC, the Victoria Sexual Assault Centre and Clinic is a model, an absolute model for how to aid victims of sexual assault and violence. We must do more in our communities, and we must do more as parliamentarians. I appreciate the time allowed this morning to speak to the bill. I look forward to its passage, I hope, unanimously. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. It's amazing in terms of what it is that we can do on the floor of the House of Commons. You know, last week we passed legislation relatively quickly when all parties, Greens, New Democrats, Conservatives, Liberals, all came together, and we passed wage subsidy legislation and rent assistance. And then it went on to the Senate, and it's actually received royal assent. Now we have yet another piece of legislation that appears to have the support, again, of Greens, New Democrats, Conservatives, and Liberals. And hopefully it will go to the Senate later today. And I'm wondering if the leader of the Green Party, or the former leader of the Green Party, could just provide her thoughts in terms of just how constructive we can be on the floor of the House of Commons once we collaborate and work together.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks to the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. And this is not something that will surprise anyone who knows me in this place. I know that we accomplish our very best when we are able to set partisanship aside. And when we are together in common cause, the Parliament of Canada represents the best of Canada. When we allow ourselves to devolve into, oh, I know, I've got a sucker punch idea, that'll go over really well in question period, that's when Canadians are disappointed in us. So if we can see ourselves first and foremost as parliamentarians and somewhere down the list as politicians, I think we'll make Canadians proud of us. I remember the words of our current speaker when he accepted election as speaker, that we should conduct ourselves in ways that would make our children proud if they happened to tune in. And today is one of those days.
We're getting ready for question and question period, and I would just let the member know that she'll have about 3 minutes left after question period to continue responding. Statements by members, déclaration des pétitions. The honourable member for St. John's, Rothsay. The honourable member for St. John's, Rothsay. There. The The honourable member for St. John's Rothsay. OK. Je vais aller à M. Sloan. The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to honour the following people and businesses who have went above and beyond during the pandemic response in Hastings, Lennox and Addington. Karen and Harold Bailey from Centre Hastings, Joan Donaldson, Joanne Carroll and Jackie Scott from Tudor and Cashel, Debbie Rollins, the long-term care director of Hastings Quinte, Massmates Napanee, who provided free Massmates for healthcare workers, Sarah Routier from Belleville for her efforts on mental health, Don Switzer, the clerk treasurer in Faraday Township, the following school officials from Bancroft: Wayne Stewart, Lisa Resmer, Terrace Human, Marion Wilson, Rob Lake, Lisa McKenna Sutherland, and Pat Flagler. Morningstar Mission, the Lions Club, and Marie's Place for delivering meals across Greater Napanee. Tim Hortons in Napanee for a record-breaking Smile Cookie campaign with almost $20,000 raised. And Tim Hortons Tweed, who gave free coffee for a search party for Brock Beattie, who tragically lost his life recently. My heart goes out to the Beattie family for their loss. Thank you, and God bless.
The honourable member for St. John's Rothsay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Trans rights are human rights. That's why I was proud to vote in favor of Bill C-16, which entrenched trans rights in the Canadian Human Rights Act in the last Parliament. It's also why I was proud to vote in favor of banning conversion therapy by voting in favor of Bill C-6 at second reading last month. However, despite the tremendous progress we have made towards ensuring the protection of the rights of trans Canadians over the past 5 years, we still have much work to do to ensure that we eradicate transphobia in Canada. On this Transgender Day of Remembrance, let us reflect upon the lives that have been lost as a result of transphobia and the hatred, violence, and discrimination it fosters, and redouble our commitment to tackling the scourge of transphobia and ensuring that the rights of all trans Canadians are protected. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Esquimalt, Saanich-Sooke.
Mr. Speaker, today I want to mark the Trans Day of Remembrance and to call attention to the more than 350 trans and gender diverse people who were murdered this past year and the more than 3,500 people killed over the past decade worldwide just for being themselves. Some may think that such heinous crimes could never happen here in Canada. Unfortunately, that is not the case. This past year alone, Canada saw the murders of 2 transgender Canadians. We must take this as a reminder that not only discrimination, but also hatred persists, and that we must continue to fight for safety and full equality for all. While 2020 has been a challenging year for all of us, it has hit the transgender and gender diverse community especially hard. COVID has brought even greater challenges for a population that already faces barriers in finding housing, employment, and seeking out supportive health care. I not only call on members to mourn the losses of our parents, children, and siblings, but at the same time to celebrate the strength and resiliency of this community.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Madam Speaker. At the end of November, the month of the cause of diabetes, I would like to, with slightly less emotion than yesterday, but with just as much pride, highlight the work of a Sherbrooke resident, Dr. André Carpentier, who has distinguished himself internationally in diabetes research. He's created a new molecular study system. He's the first to study thermogenesis. Dr. Carpentier and his team are also the only ones who have been able to study the metabolic spread of food grease and fat, which can help us to fight against type 2 diabetes. A researcher at the Centre Hospitalier de l'Université de Sherbrooke and director and co-director of a number of diabetes research networks, Dr. Carpentier, in December will also become the new scientific leader for the CHUS. Congratulations for your work and your great participation.
Member for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For generations, Canadians have been proud to visit and showcase Parliament Hill, our House of Commons, the Peace Tower, the Centennial Flame. However, with the ongoing work taking place here to renovate these historical assets, Canadians are becoming increasingly concerned with the cost in an accountability process that continues to spiral out of control. This week, it was reported that another $153 million was added to the now $4.4 billion project and growing with every update. It is now at least 4 times the size of the original estimates. It is very clear that the governance and oversight in this project is a mess. To use the old saying, too many cooks in the kitchen. Madam Speaker, I love Parliament Hill and I'm honoured to serve here, but it is projects like this that make our federal government look incapable of managing our tax dollars properly. I implore this chamber and the minister to intervene immediately, come up with a proper governance and oversight plan, and get this project back on a reasonable budget.
The honourable member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Madam Speaker, I'm here today to congratulate the Minister of Canadian Heritage for being a champion to our cultural industries with his vision for the future and also in dealing with the immediacy of the pandemic. Ensuring that web giants contribute to the creation, production, and distribution of Canadian stories is long overdue. Local news outlets play such an important role in our communities. Supporting them is critical. So is helping our film and television industry. Etobicoke Lakeshore is a film hub in Canada, even known as Hollywood North. Cinespace and William F. White are 2 of the big players creating jobs and supporting our local businesses. The pandemic hurt this industry in unconventional ways. I am proud that we stepped up to offer short-term compensation to address the lack of COVID-19 insurance, and I am proud we ensured financial support for gig workers, key to the film industry. Film and TV are so vital to our cultural identity and my local economy. As we move forward, we will be there for them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Ottawa West Nepean.
Madam Speaker, during this COVID-19 pandemic, we have all seen heartbreaking tragedies amongst the elderly in our communities, especially those in long-term care. This crisis has only made visible and amplified problems that have existed for a very long time. Today, I pay tribute to Mind the Gap, a brave group of women in my riding who have been working for many years at all levels of government to find solutions. Mind the Gap began as a peer support group of 6 women whose husbands suffered from Alzheimer's. 5 of them experienced placing their spouses in long-term care, and most are now widows. What makes these women remarkable is that they have chosen to dedicate their time now to use their lived experience to turn to advocacy. I first met them when they were advocating for a national dementia strategy. During the current crisis, they have been providing thoughtful solutions, including advocacy for national standards for long-term care and researching positive models from around the world. At this very difficult time, I want to thank Mind the Gap for turning their personal tragedies into a basis for action. Thank you.
For Edmonton Centre.
Madam Speaker, hardworking travel agents are struggling. In my riding for over 30 years, Paul Travel has provided travel service. It's a company like many others, including independent travel agents, who after decades of hard work have found themselves in an impossible situation where the only avenue they may be able to take is to go out of business for good. Brought on by the pandemic, but made more hostile by government's inability to provide rapid testing for Canadians and much needed support for airlines, many travel agencies and independent providers are facing revenue decreases of in excess of 90%. Paul Travel has done everything in their power to retain their 13 all-female team, many who are their families' main earners, but with products sold being refunded, commissions are getting clawed back. Nobody saw this pandemic and the situations travelers have been left in are devastated. No debate there. But at the end of the day, services provided should be services paid. And any government support to the airline industry, travel agents, cannot be collateral damage.
Honourable member for Milton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. COVID-19 has been tough for everyone, but with Canada's hospitality industry facing so many unique challenges, it's been particularly difficult for local restaurants across the country. Our government has provided billions and support, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the commercial rent assistance programs. Wage subsidy alone has provided over $3.6 billion to restaurants from March to September. And with patio season wrapping up, restaurants head into a harsh winter. So I'm glad that we've extended the wage subsidy and expanded the CEBA. But Madam President, it's not enough. Restaurants need our support. I want to take a moment to thank restaurateurs, management, and industry staff here in Milton who have found a way continuing to serve during the most difficult year ever. From the Rad Brothers to Eddio's to Bryden's Caribbean Vibes, the Thai House, the Green Eater, Eatery, Grill Daddy, Nan Guys, and our local Paramount Fine Foods. I'm sorry I can't name them all. Our restaurants here in Milton have found ways to serve our community with great deals, free meals for veterans and the less fortunate, and help out where they can. Canadians have been there, Madam President, but when we need to continue ordering in for meals and supporting the local restaurants who have always been there for us and will be when COVID-19 is history. Thank you.
The honourable member for Carleton.
I rise today to pay tribute to a great patriot who, after a long life of service and sacrifice, duty and discipline to community and country, has gone home to his Lord and Savior. Claude Bennett was humble, but had nothing to be humble about. His 27 years as an alderman and member of provincial parliament were distinguished. He saved countless lives by helping to bring the Ottawa Heart Institute to this city, an institute that in the end did 3 surgeries on him alone. He was relentless in his support of the community. He chaired AAA baseball, was the head of the Ottawa Hall of Fame for sports, and became the president of the Canadian exhibition here in Ottawa as well. And he continued into his later years, playing an amazing 54 holes of golf on his 75th birthday and regularly walking as much as 10 miles in a single day. He is the great patriarch of the legendary Bennett family. We all pay tribute to him and his life. He lives on through his family and friends in this world, even as he passes into the next. Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Statistics Canada reports that nearly 1 in 3 small businesses does not know how much longer it can stay in business, and this government still can't get its rent subsidy right. Bill C-9 was written on the fly and had to be rushed through this Parliament without proper scrutiny, even though they had months to get it right. As written, this bill excludes the businesses that need help the most, the ones that have fallen behind while waiting for this government. The finance minister had a solution. She told the Senate Finance Committee that since she clearly intended for these businesses to qualify, the CRA can just interpret the law according to her intentions. I mean, really, Madam Speaker? That's how it works? It's the minister's intention that counts? It's not the rule of law now, it's the rule of ministerial intention? Madam Speaker, intentions don't pay the rent, and neither do endless announcements. It's November 20th, the first is coming soon, and thousands of small businesses don't know how they're going to pay the rent.
The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
Oh, excuse, the honourable member for Victoria, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Post-secondary students and recent graduates are still not getting the help they need. In my riding, many UVic and Camosun students have fallen through the cracks of the pandemic relief programs. They couldn't get summer jobs, and while the Liberal government helped out their friends, students got none of the $900 million set aside to help them. And to make it worse, while students are struggling to pay rent, the government has started collecting on student loans again and continues to make money off the backs of students by collecting millions, charging interest on student debt. As we face the second wave of COVID-19 across the country, Liberals are still leaving students behind. I want to give a shout out to the Don't Forget Students campaign. It's time for the government to live up to their promises and start listening to students.
I understand that the member for Winnipeg South Centre had some technical difficulties, but now online, so therefore the honourable member for Winnipeg South Centre. Unfortunately, the microphone is not on.
Madam Speaker, each year on November the 16th, Métis people across Canada pay tribute to the Métis leader and founder, Louis Riel. He devoted and sacrificed his life defending the rights of Métis people. Riel's legacy continues to resonate across the homeland. In addition to recognizing Louis Riel Day, the Métis Nation of Alberta has declared the week surrounding November 16th as Métis Week. It celebrates the culture, history, and contributions of Métis people to Alberta and to Canada with events held across the province. As Métis Week comes to a close, I urge all parliamentarians and all Canadians to reflect upon the important contributions and sacrifices of the Métis. Our government supports Métis Nation-led initiatives for post-secondary education and housing in Métis communities. We will continue to work government to government with the Métis Nation to make a real difference in the lives of Métis people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Madam Speaker, I would like to highlight the Grande Semaine des Tout-Petits, or Grand Week for Toddlers, that is currently taking place in Quebec. This week was created following the Forum Tous pour eux, All for Them, which was held in 2015, and the goal of which was to bring together local and regional players on childhood and perinatal issues. The Grande Semaine des Tout-Petits aims to remind us of the importance of continuing to enthusiastically support initiatives that help our toddlers. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I'm pleased to speak today to thank each of the organisations and stakeholders who work for our toddlers. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight International Children's Day, which is taking place today, because our childhood is our future, our joy and our purity. We must continue our efforts to ensure that our children's future is equal to their aspirations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Topic-Mactaquac.
Madam Speaker, for months now, the Nova Scotia fishing crisis has continued to escalate. Tensions have risen with each passing week. We have heard testimony at the Fisheries Committee from Indigenous leaders, commercial fishermen, DFO representatives, and academics. The common thread in this crisis is that no one is happy with the performance of this Liberal government. Even the Liberal Premier of Nova Scotia said that he is, quote, very dissatisfied, and that we need the federal minister to sit down with all sides in a room. It is not enough to sit down with Indigenous leaders or with fishing associations by themselves, end quote. On Wednesday night, the fisheries minister admitted that she has not even read the Marshall decision, which is a foundational ruling in this crisis. Madam Speaker, Nova Scotians are tired of empty words and inaction. They need a minister who understands her job, does her homework, and provides the necessary leadership to de-escalate this crisis. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Madam Speaker, it's Global Entrepreneurship Week, and I can't think of a better time to highlight the winner of our local Vaughan Chambers Young Entrepreneurship Under 40 Award, Robert Federici, owner of Chow Roma, in my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. Madam Speaker, the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce has been serving our dynamic and entrepreneurial city of Vaughan for years, strengthening and fostering business relationships. The VC's 2020 Business Achievement Awards took on a virtual look this year, but the connection was not lost amongst the nearly 500 virtual attendees, cheering on winners such as Durock Alfacing, winner of the Innovation and Technology Award, Pizza Nova, winner of Hospitality, and other winners such as Fazarian Partners, TAC Construction, and the Cortel Group. A special recognition for the Community Spirit Award winner, Peter Wixon, the founder of the Vaughan Food Bank, whose dedication over 3 decades inspires so many. Madam Speaker, small businesses know across this country and can be rest assured that our government has their backs as we all continue to face and battle COVID-19. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Deputy Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Speaker, this country is in a worse crisis than we ever could have imagined. 11 months after COVID has hit, thousands of lives, millions of jobs, and Canadians' freedoms have been lost. Canadians were told last March if they just followed the rules, we would flatten the curve and things would get better. Well, things are not better. The Prime Minister has failed in managing this crisis, and yesterday's report is proof of that. Canadians deserve some answers and the truth. When will the Prime Minister realize that getting rapid at-home testing, having reliable tracing, and getting Canadians all the data is his job, and he's failing miserably at it?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Chair, Madam Speaker, from day one, we have been there to support provinces and territories in their responsibilities to deliver healthcare. We've sent rapid tests, support long-term home care, additional contact tracing and test processing capacity, and we've provided $19 billion through the Safe Restart Agreement. Our vaccine portfolio is one of the strongest in the world, and we are working with partners to ensure that we will be ready to deploy when the time comes. Madam Speaker, we've taken a Team Canada approach to COVID-19, and we will continue to work to keep Canadians safe and healthy every day.
I just want to remind members to keep the going back and forth down while there's question period, so that we can really hear what is going, what those who are speaking are saying. The Honourable Deputy Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, Canadians are being kept in the dark by this Prime Minister. He's throwing numbers at them without any context. Too often the government can't tell us what activities are driving up COVID-19 numbers. One day it's restaurants, the next day it's weddings, then it's schools, then it isn't. Our lack of detailed data prevents us from tracking outbreaks and knowing the highest risk settings. 1 year after the first COVID case was flagged in China, Canadians still don't have answers. When will the government release the data that they are using to make decisions on this pandemic?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for the question. Madam Speaker, as weather gets colder, we need to keep practicing the things that have kept us safe. The things that we've done that worked in the first wave: physical distancing, frequent hand washing, avoiding large or crowded gatherings. We see the numbers going up, but the pandemic isn't over yet. We must be vigilant. I know it's hard to be away from your loved ones, but by staying apart, you're keeping each other safe.
The Honourable Deputy Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals' plan is not working. The cases are going up, jobs are being lost, Canadians are at risk. Now, Madam Speaker, we know South Korea was one of the first countries impacted by COVID-19. On Monday, it reported 230 new cases for a population of 51 million people. And they knew for certain that 202 cases were community spread and 28 were imported. And countries like Taiwan had early access to rapid testing, and that has helped them reduce their COVID numbers. Why has this government not learned a thing from other countries like South Korea or Taiwan, who are doing things right, and instead continuing to have Canadians fly blind on COVID-19?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And again, I thank the Honourable Member for the question. We know these are challenging times, and Canadians have stepped up to help stop the spread of COVID-19. The federal government has been working closely from day one, Madam Speaker, with provinces and territories to ensure that they have the tools that they need, that they feel that they need to respond to the pandemic. Modeling shows that we need to keep working at the measures that have kept us safe. This includes, as I said before, physical distancing, frequent hand washing, and wearing a mask. Madam Speaker, we will continue to do everything that we can to keep Canadians healthy and safe.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Madam Speaker, we all remember the Prime Minister lecturing us outside Rideau Cottage, telling us to be prepared for the second wave. Now, 11 months later, there's still no plan. We're hearing lots of talk, but no plan. Thousands of lives and jobs have been lost. Hundreds of billions of dollars have been added to the national debt. But when we talk about the border and rapid testing and vaccines, that's their responsibility. Where's the plan?
L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while scientists around the world do very important work to find a vaccine for COVID-19, we are working to make sure that Canadians are able to get vaccinated when the time comes. That's why we're securing a range of vaccines and hundreds of millions of doses so that Canadians are safe and well served. Now, Madam Speaker, a few vaccine candidates have published some very promising results, and things seem to be moving very quickly. We will continue to work with our partners to ensure that Canadians will have access to a vaccine when it becomes available.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Madam Speaker, at some point, we have to stop mocking Canadians. Canadians won't be fooled. This morning, the Minister has said we're going to have vaccinations in the spring. But at the same time, we've learned that the provincial premiers know that Pfizer will have 4 million doses, and Moderna will have them in March. Why can't the government tell Canadians that the doses will arrive in that quantity in March? Where is their plan?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Again, Madam Speaker, in these uncertain times, Canadians have responded to our calls for action, making changes to their ways of life. They've seen what works in Wave 1, and they know what will work in Wave 2. We need to ensure that we don't put our guard down. There is work ahead of us to stop the virus. Our modeling shows that we are reaching dangerous case numbers into the winter months if we continue current trends. I know these measures are hard, but we cannot afford to stop. We can't let our guard down. We must continue to do this work until all are safe.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, the current debate on French reminds us of a historic reality, the two solitudes in Canada. And the Bloc has made a very simple proposal. To obtain citizenship in Quebec, people would have to demonstrate a basic knowledge of French. We're not talking about a doctoral thesis, Madam Speaker, just enough to understand what's happening in Quebec society, to greet your neighbour, in short, the basics. Everyone in Quebec finds that reasonable. Why is it creating such a malaise here to the point that the government wants to vote against it?
L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Oh, l'Honorable Secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Je remercie ma collègue pour.
I would thank my colleague for her question. As you know, our government is a strong defender of the French language. I am a proud Quebecer myself who defends the values of French in the province. We are dedicated in our action to supporting the French language, to promote Francophone immigration, thanks to our efforts, namely, as part of the Express Entry program, where we've increased points. We will continue to find new ways to increase Francophone immigration and to support French. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, we have a solution. What we want in Quebec is to avoid creating two solitudes between Quebec society and newcomers. It's a fact. French is a language that's used at home and it's in decline. Newcomers are less inclined than in English Canada to use a common language, which is French. It's a fact that without knowledge of this language, newcomers struggle to live up to their potential. Does the government realize that by undermining the importance of French, it's hurting the people it thinks it's trying to serve? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. As I said yesterday on the bill that was put forth by the Bloc, I am an immigrant myself. I was under Bill 101. I'm a Canadian citizen, and I didn't know how to speak French when I became a Canadian citizen. The issue, Madam Speaker, is welcoming immigrants to our country. The Liberals voted against the NDP motion to impose a wealth tax. As Canadians struggle, billionaires have earned significantly more since the start of the pandemic. 80% of Canadians support a wealth tax and on excessive profits. The Liberals are still saying no. Why are the interests of billionaires placed ahead of other Canadians by this government? The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have no doubt that the NDP opposition motion was well-intentioned, but it was very poorly executed. I point the honourable member to the speech from the throne, which committed to finding new ways to tax ultra-wealthy Canadians. I have a question in return for him, though, Madam Speaker. Why is it that the NDP, when given the opportunity to support a motion that raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could cut taxes for the middle class, did they vote against it? Why did they refuse to support the Canada Child Benefit, which sent more money to 9 out of 10 Canadian families and stop sending checks to millionaires? Madam Speaker, we will always defend middle-class Canadians, and we're not afraid to ask Canada's wealthiest to pay a little more.
Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Another parliamentary secretary for children and families asked very crudely this morning, who gives a fuddle-duddle about pharmacare? You know who cares about pharmacare, Madam Speaker? Children and families and over 90% of Canadians. And Canadians know how to pay for it too. Over 80% support a wealth tax and an excess profits tax. In this pandemic, billionaires have gotten $37 billion in new wealth. Banks have gotten $750 billion in liquidity supports. So with Liberals, why do banks and billionaires always come before Canadians? And why is the message to regular Canadians always fuddle-duddle you?
I I want to remind the members on the Liberal government side at this point to not be heckling while someone else has the floor. The honourable member, the honourable parliamentary secretary.
Madam Speaker, I question the honourable member's appropriateness in his use of language in his question. In any event, I'd reiterate my point that we have committed to finding new ways to tax Canada's wealthiest. Madam Speaker, we will continue to move forward with measures that will support the middle class. When we raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% to cut taxes for the middle class, the NDP voted against it. When we changed the child care benefit to put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, the NDP voted against it. Madam Speaker, what separates us from the NDP is they're happy to wave their arms to make a point. We will not be satisfied until we advance policies that make a difference.
The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Madam Speaker, rapid tests are an essential tool to combating the coronavirus. Other countries have had rapid tests way before Canada did. The Prime Minister recently said it wasn't his job to approve rapid tests, implying it wasn't his fault, but rather Health Canada's. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister is head of government. It's his job to oversee the regulatory approval process that leads to the approval of these tests. When will he take action to reform the process and get these tests into the hands of Canadians?
The honourable minister.
Madam Speaker, the member loves to talk about numbers. I'll give you some numbers here. Over 4.6 million rapid tests have been sent to provinces and territories to date. Over 2 million to Ontario, 1.2 million to Quebec, 354,000 to BC, 327,000 to Alberta, 200,000 to Manitoba. Madam Speaker, you know, the member speaks about moving rapid tests across the country. We've done that. We've done that, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Well, Madam Speaker, the government can rattle off statistics all it wants. The reality is it was late in approving rapid tests, and now we're late in delivering them to Canadians. There's a pattern here. The Deputy Prime Minister said in September that she went out of her way to say that the government wouldn't lean on scientists to get a move on rapid tests. We need rapid tests at our borders, so important to our airline industry. Air Canada and WestJet have laid off over 30,000 people and are losing tens of millions of dollars a day. When will the government take action to reform the process to get these tests into the hands of Canadians?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Madam Speaker, 1 minute the member asks for numbers. I give him numbers, I give him facts, I give him stats, and then he ridicules me for giving him what he asked for. Madam Speaker, we know the importance of having quick access to test results. Our department is fast-tracking the review of COVID test results, including rapid response test kits. We will continue our work with our partners, the provinces and territories, to ensure that people who need to be tested are able to be tested.
Honourable member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Madam Speaker, the FDA had approved 5 tests last August. Other countries had approved rapid tests way before Canada and have rolled them out across their country at their borders, at their airports. Canada has yet to do so, and as a result, our airline industry is failing and tens of thousands of jobs have been lost. The airlines are at risk of failure. The government has failed to act on rapid tests to ensure their survivability. When will the government take action, fix the process, and get these tests into the hands of Canadians?
The honourable parliamentary secretary to the Ministry of Health.
Madam Speaker, I clearly told the member earlier that we have taken action. Testing, and we realize this, Madam Speaker, testing is one of the most important tools that we have to respond to COVID-19. And our officials, and I want to thank the Health Canada officials, Madam Speaker, they are working around the clock to review and approve new testing technologies. We've approved 6 of these tests, and we can expect more as the technology develops. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Madam Speaker, throughout the year, responsible countries took direct action to quickly authorize quick testing. Unfortunately, the Liberal government dragged its feet. What does the Prime Minister say this week? Well, he said it's not my responsibility to look after that. We're following the process. A real leader, Madam Speaker, makes state decisions when in a situation like this. Why have the Liberals dragged their feet on rapid testing? It's affecting the health of Canadians. The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Madam Speaker, I guess I need to reiterate some of these numbers again. Over 4.6 million rapid tests have been sent to this date to provinces and territories. Over 2 million to Ontario, 1.276 million to Quebec, 354,000 to BC. I'll go down the list. Manitoba, 200,000. Nova Scotia, 71,000. Saskatchewan, 87,000. Madam Speaker, that is action right there. That is action. Our department is working around the clock to do what Canadians need to keep them healthy and safe.
The Honourable Member. The figures provided by the Parliamentary Secretary are too late because in other countries, what are they doing? Well, they have approved rapid testing. That was last summer. In July last year, there were only 170 new cases in Canada. It was the lowest number since the outbreak. Yesterday, it was over 4,600. If the government had taken action last March to approve rapid testing, we could have avoided a new outbreak. Why has the government dragged its feet? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Member for the question, but I want to say that I will take Canada's response to this COVID-19 pandemic over just about any country in the world. Okay, Madam Speaker? And to speak to the fact that of politicians making decisions or overruling Health Canada officials, on this side of the House, Madam Speaker, we believe in science and we believe in evidence, and we always will.
The Honourable Member.
Will tell if Canada did so well in this situation compared to our neighbor.
Because, Madam Speaker, in the United States, they didn't drag their feet. In the summer, they approved rapid testing. Well, the government here dragged its feet. The government has said, well, it's not my responsibility. When you're a leader, a state leader, you take responsibilities and the steps needed to save Canadians. Why is the government dragging its feet? Why did the government drag its feet? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
On the contrary, Madam Speaker, the government did not drag its feet. Again, I will reiterate, I will take the Canadian response to COVID-19 over most countries' response to COVID-19 any day of the week. Again, I can go over the stats, I can go over the data, I can read these over again. If they ask the same question, Madam Speaker, the answer will be the same.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, I know that we're in a pandemic, but it still makes no sense that there hasn't been a budget since the election. Never has the federal government spent so much in its history, and never has there been so little transparency. The government has not been accountable for 19 months. The Bloc is asking for a budget. The Minister of Finance refused. But she's been committing for months to hold an economic update this fall. Now it's the end of November. When, and I want a date, when will the economic update take place? The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, the suggestion that the government has not been transparent with respect to our pandemic response is ludicrous. The reality is, from the very beginning, under exceptional circumstances, we made a process in agreement with other parties to provide regular updates. In fact, I attended as a witness before the Finance Committee, where I believe that honourable member was personally in attendance. We've provided regular information. We will be providing a fiscal update in the very near future, and I look forward to sharing the details, including the measures included in that document, with that member and all members of the chamber.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, for the Parliamentary Secretary to be accountable, it doesn't mean filibustering. Now, the government has promised two essential things, and for which it has refused to give dates: the economic update and a meeting with health ministers on health transfers with first ministers. They go hand in hand. The government has just announced dire predictions on the spread of COVID. It can't just watch from the sidelines. In the economic update, it needs to specify room for maneuver and an increase in health transfers. Will the government do its part in this area, and will it announce a date? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question, and I can reassure him that we will be providing an update on fiscal projections this fall, and he will have that information as soon as it is available. I don't want to prejudge conversations that may happen between the federal and provincial governments. However, if he has feedback that he would like to inform those discussions, I would invite him, as I always do, to contact me directly so we can incorporate his ideas as well as ideas that may come from members of any party in the House of Commons.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lizette-Chemin-Lévis. Madam Speaker, it's been a very trying week for French language under the Liberal regime, denying the decline of French in Montreal, calling the French language charter oppressive by the President of the Liberal Party. They can retract their statements and erase tweets, but yesterday the Liberals tried to sweep under the carpet a study on the decline of French in the country at the Official Languages Committee. Why are they abandoning language communities across the country? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. Our government acknowledges that there is a decline in French in Quebec. As a francophone, French is not just a debate. It's what I write, it's what I do, it's who I am. Inaudible. By all members. It's important for all members of the Liberal Party. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lizette-Chemin-Lévis. Well, what are they waiting for then? Because when things go badly, we know who our real friends are. And yesterday, the Francophone, Acadian and English minority communities in Quebec realized that the Liberals were abandoning them in these difficult times. They're all calling for one thing: a modernization of the Act. Yesterday, the Liberals did everything they could at committee to prevent the committee from asking the government to table this bill before Christmas. Why? Do they want a national crisis?
L'honorable leader du gouvernement.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Madam Speaker, my colleague is out in left field. I'd like to remind him of something. The party that he belongs to cut funding for CBC, cut Francophone communities, took minority communities to court. During the leadership rate, they said there was too much French in the leadership debate, and today they still refuse to appoint bilingual judges to the Supreme Court. It's that party, that very party, that my colleague represents, so we will take no lessons from them. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, infighting is underway in the Liberal Party, it would appear. On the one hand, there is an MP who denies that French is on the decline in Montreal. The head of the Liberal Party claims that Bill 101 is oppressive. On the other hand, Liberal ministers are saying it's all fine and well. They've refused all week to commit to introducing their bill. The MPs for Compton Stansted, Sherbrooke, Brome-Missisquoi are all silent. Why?
Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. That is not true. We are present. We are there. We will always promote and protect the French language. I, as all of my colleagues are Quebecers, first and foremost, Francophones. We have taken steps, concrete steps, and we will continue to do so. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, you want proof that the Liberals are just talking, not delivering? Yesterday, at the Official Languages Committee, they adjourned a debate on the decline of French. They prevented the tabling of a motion calling for the modernization of the Official Languages Act. As a former Quebec Prime Minister said, proof is proof. Why are the Quebec Liberals refusing to commit today to introduce a bill to modernize the official languages before Christmas? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have taken steps. We have held consultations. There have been reports. We are working hand in hand with the provinces, with Quebec specifically, to ensure that we put forth a sustainable bill. It's like they've just realized that the importance of French on that side.
Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Madam Speaker, the spotted owl is listed as endangered in Canada. There was once 1,000 of them here, but after old-growth forest loss, there is only 3 left. Now, 2 of those nest in the Spuzzum Creek Valley of British Columbia, where their critical habitat is being logged right now. And under the Species at Risk Act, the Minister of Environment can make an emergency order to force provinces to protect species. And if there were ever a case to make such an order, this would appear to be it. So will the minister act immediately to protect this species before it vanishes from Canada?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for the question and for his passion and commitment to endangered species. The honourable member will know that our government is extremely serious about endangered species and protecting them, and the spotted owl is very much in our sights, Mr. Speaker, to protect, and I want to thank the honourable member for the question.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Last night at 2 a.m., the Liberal Parliamentary Secretary for Housing responded to a post promoting the NDP pharmacare bill with, quote, WGAF. It would be unparliamentary for me to expand on the acronym, but it basically means who really cares. The answer is 93% of Canadians care, including those who have to choose between paying for rent, putting food on the table, or buying the medicine that they need. To the Minister of Health, is this the real reason why Canadians still don't have universal public pharmacare after 23 years of Liberal promises? Because the Liberals simply don't care.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you very much for a chance to apologize for that tweet. It was a very strange one coming from me, and I regret that that acronym was used. It wasn't intended; it was a typo. That being said, our commitment to pharmacare, is in the throne speech. The commitment to make sure that we support vulnerable Canadians, including ending chronic homelessness, are all part of the throne speech, and we are very, very serious about delivering on these commitments.
The honourable member for Kings Hants.
Madam Speaker, our broadcasting system predates the digital age and puts Canadian broadcasters at a disadvantage, which is why our government has introduced legislation to ensure online broadcasters contribute their fair share to support Canadian music and stories. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage tell the House how this bill will benefit all Canadians from coast to coast to coast? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Kings Hants for his question. Canada's broadcasting, film, television, and interactive media sectors contribute $19.7 billion to Canada's GDP and account for nearly 160,000 jobs. Modernized legislation would bring up to $830 million annually to Canadian music and stories once the new system's in place. Having role models on screen and in production is essential to assert one's identity, particularly through one's own language. I encourage all members of this House.
The Mississippi Churchill River.
Madam Speaker, extremely concerning reports of bullying, harassment, and conflicts of interest have been reported within ISC's offices in Atlantic Canada. Last year, out of desperation, a staff person raised this issue with the former ISC minister and the Prime Minister, but have yet to receive a response. Several other allegations, including some of a sexual nature, have gone without action by this government. Madam Speaker, what is it about healthy workplaces that this government can't seem to get right?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, workplace harassment and violence is completely unacceptable. And that is why we introduced and passed Bill C-65, protecting employees from harassment and violence in federal workplaces, including Parliament Hill. With regulations now in force, this legislation will now come into force on January 1st, 2021. By instituting new processes and protections under the Labour Code, the regulations will support all workers, including the ones mentioned by the honourable member, to ensure that our workplaces are more healthy and more safe.
The honourable member for Desnette, Mississippi Churchill River.
Madam Speaker, this week at the INAN Committee, we heard from the CCAB and NACA of repeated delays similar to the first wave in access to supports for Indigenous businesses. They also reported that out of several hundred applications from Indigenous businesses to supply PPE, only 7 were awarded contracts, representing 0.04% of the total federal spend. For a government that likes to talk a lot about reconciliation, why are these Indigenous businesses being left behind again?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I thank the honourable member for his question. And I too listened to the CCAB talk about procurement and express their concerns. And I've shared those concerns with the Minister for Procurement and Public Services. Having said that, we recognize that Indigenous businesses face unique challenges and may be disproportionately affected by this pandemic. We announced $117 million to help Indigenous communities support their local businesses and economies, and $16 million stimulus development fund to support Indigenous tourism. We're committed to helping Indigenous businesses through the pandemic and into the recovery. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Madam Speaker, 1 in 3 small businesses across Canada are losing money every day they try to stay open. And as of January 1st, they'll be hit with a major hike in Canada Pension Plan premiums. Now, this is an onerous and untimely burden on small businesses struggling to survive and for employees transitioning off emergency benefits. Madam Speaker, will the government do the right thing and postpone the CPP premium hike?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for that question. Right from day one, we know how important it is to support businesses and the workers they employ, particularly in those small businesses all across the country. They are littered in all of our main streets and our vibrant communities. So supporting them to help them pay for payroll, supporting them with small business loans, supporting them with important fixed cost support like rent. We're doing that, and we're going to keep doing that to support our small businesses across the country.
The honourable member for Foothills.
If we hope to reopen our economy and protect the health and safety of Canadians, access to rapid testing is imperative. Countries around the world have shown that rapid testing is a safe alternative to quarantine. In fact, the head of the WHO said rapid testing is a critical tool for governments to reopen their economy and ultimately save both lives and livelihoods. But the Deputy Prime Minister, who heads Canada's COVID response, compared access to rapid testing to selling snake oil to Canadians. Does the Health Minister agree with her colleague's point of view on rapid testing?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I've said before, testing is one of the most important tools we have to respond to COVID-19. And our officials are working around the clock. And again, I want to thank the Health Canada officials for working so hard to approve new testing technologies. We've already authorized 6 of these tests. We can expect more as the technology develops. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Abitibi-Temiskaming. Madam Speaker, a month ago, the government called for a special committee to study all COVID-related spending. Since then, it's come to light that Ottawa has given $600 million untendered for medical equipment to 2 companies that don't manufacture medical equipment. 2 empty shells, one of which stuffed $237 million into the pockets of a former Liberal MP. Since these stories came out, the government's been blocking its own committee on COVID spending. It's fishy. Another example, a flagrant example of the Liberal lack of transparency. Can the Liberal House Leader explain why this committee is being obstructed? The Honourable Government House Leader. Madam Speaker, the government has been transparent since day one. What we've put in place, we've done together with the other parties. It's a minority parliament. Madam Speaker, there's not one thing we've been able to do without the support of at least one other party. We've done this all together. That's transparency. That's cooperation. The honourable member for Lac Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, Raif Badawi has been jailed for 8 years in Saudi Arabia. but a window is finally opening for him and his family. Tomorrow, I repeat, tomorrow, Saudi Arabia hosts the G20 summit. Customarily, the Saudi regime shows clemency when organizing major international events. Yesterday, the bloc called on the government to use this opportunity to call for the release of Raif Badawi. They confirmed they were concerned, but that's not enough. This is happening tomorrow. Has the government taken steps to request the release of Raif Badawi? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We remain extremely concerned about Raif Badawi. I've met his wife here in Ottawa, and the Minister is in constant contact with his family. The promotion and protection of human rights, including freedom of expression, of conscience and religion and belief, are integral parts of Canada's foreign policy. We have raised this at the highest levels, and we have repeatedly made calls for clemency.
The Honourable Member for Parry Sound, Muskoka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At least 400 of the summer camps across Canada employing 70,000 people are facing bankruptcy next year. Meanwhile, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business reports that hundreds of thousands of small firms have received zero support because they fall through the cracks. Every day, more and more shops, restaurants, hotels in Parry Sound, Muskoka, and all across Canada are forced to close their doors. Why has this government completely abandoned small business, summer camps, and the tourism sector?
The Honourable Minister.
I'd like to thank the member opposite for raising the issue of summer camps. It's a serious concern. Seasonal businesses, in particular those that support youth, have been a focus of our government. But unfortunately, the support is challenging to get to seasonal businesses like summer camps. We did provide a substantial support to the nonprofit and charitable sector with emergency funding. Some of this supported the summer camp programs, but there's clearly more work to do on the seasonal industries, and we're committed to making sure that Canada's children are properly taken care of, as are those businesses.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Skyview.
Madam Speaker, over 82% of travel agents are women, whose income is solely tied to the commissions from selling airfares and vacation packages to their clients. However, when airlines refund customers, the airlines automatically claw back the commissions that a travel agent has earned. Madam Speaker, running a small business is no easy task. And with the majority of this industry being women, will the Minister for Women and Gender Equality ensure that any bailout package to our airline industry protects these Canadian women?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We are aware of the frustration many consumers are facing, and we've heard the voices of travel agents across the country. This is an important issue, and it's why we're working with all parties to find a way forward. We will continue to be there for Canadians and expect airlines to do everything they can to compensate their customers. Our government continues to work hard to ensure that Canadians stay connected across the country as we build our economy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
Madam Speaker, last week I had the opportunity to talk to small businesses in my riding. One owner, Paul, tells me that he was supposed to launch his business on April 1st. Of course, that didn't happen due to COVID, and business has been slow since. He's invested almost $500,000 in his business, his entire family's life saving. He's not eligible for the wage subsidy. He's not eligible for the rent subsidy because he's a new business. For the sake of Paul and thousands of businesses across the country like his, let's not have talking points. What does the minister have to say that they're going to specifically do to help Paul and save his family and thousands of businesses like his across the country?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for that really important question. Paul's business and many businesses like those are exactly what we want to do, what we are doing to help them. The Regional Relief and Recovery Fund is invested with $1.6 billion across the country through the regional development agencies that are helping businesses like Paul's and many, many others. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Châteauguay-Lac.
The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Madam Speaker, since the start of the pandemic, entrepreneurs in my riding have been asking me about their challenges, whether they are businesses in the downtown area or the industrial park. The challenges associated with the crisis are threatening the economy of my region. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Economic Development please inform this House of the additional assistance for small businesses that has been made available? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Châteauguay-Lacolle for her question and her involvement on behalf of businesses in her region. On November 5th, we had the opportunity to announce additional assistance for businesses, which will quadruple the amount of assistance available to CFDCs and BDCs in Quebec. Our government will continue to help small businesses by offering them specific and technical assistance. It's to help small businesses like those in the riding of my colleague that we have quadrupled funding, and the regional economic fabric is facing major challenges. We will be there for them.
Build nuclear reactor market. The small modular reactor business is worth hundreds of billions of dollars and tens of thousands of high-paying jobs for decades. By including nuclear in Canada's energy mix, we can meet our emissions reductions targets or turn on the lights when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. When is this government going to listen to scientists like Greenpeace founder James Hansen and get into the game?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, Canada is a Tier 1 nuclear nation with a sector that contributes $17 billion each year to our economy and employs over 76,000 Canadians. Small modular reactors are an innovation that could deliver safe, non-emitting energy and be part of getting us to net zero emissions by 2050. We are working with over 100 partners from across the country to develop Canada's SMR action plan to seize this opportunity, which will be released soon. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Hills Grassland.
Madam Speaker, Keystone XL is vital energy infrastructure. It provides jobs, certainty, and much-needed revenue for municipalities. It is essential for economic recovery. It also plays a key role in reconciliation. You see, one of the best stories about Keystone remains untold. The Chief of Nekonit First Nation in my riding is the President of Natural Law Energy, a growing alliance of First Nations who have an equity stake in the pipeline. But now the future is uncertain. Will the Prime Minister fight for Indigenous Canadians and ensure that Keystone XL is completed?
The Honourable Minister. Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you. We know that workers in Alberta and across the country are worried about the future of Keystone XL. And I want them to know we are making the case for this project. The Prime Minister raised it on his first call with the President-elect. We will continue making the case on behalf of workers in our sector. And one of the strongest arguments for this project is that we have a government that is fighting climate change, that is putting a price on pollution, that has committed to net zero emissions by 2050, that is making investments to help our energy sector become more sustainable than ever. This is the record we will be able to present to our partners in the U.S. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mission Matski Fraser Canyon.
Madam Speaker, this Liberal government is failing first-time home buyers. They promised their first-time home buyer incentive would aid 20,000 Canadians in the first 6 months, but it only reached a quarter of that in 7 months. And it doesn't accomplish its primary objective, to improve affordability in high-cost regions. 16 people in Toronto use the program, 1 person in Vancouver. When will this government implement housing policies that work for first-time home buyers?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much for the question. The first-time homebuyers mortgage program is designed to create a pathway to home ownership in a new and different way, which supports first-time buyers by supporting them in acquiring their down payment. We recognized as we rolled the program out that Vancouver and Toronto required exceptional bandwidth and a different quantifier in order to make this program more successful. The throne speech is committed to doing this, and you will see measures in the upcoming budget that will actually accomplish the issue that has been raised by the member. The real estate values in Toronto and Vancouver are different, and we need to make sure that the approach is different in those two cities as well.
The Honourable Member for Glengarry Prescott Russell. Madam Speaker, several measures to support SMEs during the pandemic have been announced in recent months. Whether it's the wage subsidy or the Regional Assistance and Recovery Fund to provide support to our businesses, our government has answered the call. This week, the Economic Development Corporation of Prescott Russell, an organization funded by the Government of Canada, granted $25,000 in funding to Leadership Féminin in my riding to support women entrepreneurs. Could the Parliamentary Secretary explain what other measures to support women entrepreneurs are being introduced? The Honourable Minister. The pandemic has had a serious impact for women entrepreneurs, and so we have undertaken to address this issue. We have provided $15 million in additional funding to support women in entrepreneurship. Women entrepreneurs are a priority to us, and we know that when women succeed, everyone succeeds.
The honourable member for Victoria.
Canadians are tired of governments committing to weak targets and then missing them again and again and again. They want action now, but this government keeps putting it off. Their new climate bill, well, a small step in the right direction, just isn't good enough. The world's top scientists have told us we are running out of time. And the next decade will be the most critical. So why did the government leave out the 2025 milestone target? Why is the government trying to avoid real accountability for a full decade, for the most critical 10 years?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this act has strong accountability and transparency provisions that include a legally binding process for this government to set and achieve climate plans every 5 years between 2030 and 2050. Madam Speaker, the very structure of the Paris Agreement is based on the year 2030. As the honourable member will know, is the BC plan, her province, and Quebec's plan, and those around the world. Madam Speaker, we will meet those targets on our path to net zero by 2050.
The honourable member for Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The government has failed to meet the warnings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The Climate Accountability Act fails utterly to heed the warning that we have to cut emissions roughly in half by 2030 in order to keep the window open of holding to 1.5 degrees Celsius. By the time the Climate Accountability Act asks anyone to be accountable, that window could have closed forever. Will the government improve this act such that it meets the warnings of science while there's still time, for God's sakes?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for her passion and commitment to this issue. And Madam Speaker, we are committed to transparency and accountability in this legislation that will help businesses and people know that they can count on Canada to be a great place to invest. It also sets very clear goals that Canadians expect us to deliver on, and they will hold our government and future governments to account if we don't. I'll remind the honourable member it was the Canadian electorate that ultimately held the Conservatives to account in 2015 and 2019 on their hostility to climate action. Be assured, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, we will follow through on this important net zero commitment.
And that brings us to the end of question period on this beautiful week. Point of order, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I do want to raise a point of order. As the Chair has ruled, the Speaker has ruled repeatedly over the years, it is just as inappropriate to say something indirectly as if it is inappropriate to say it directly. And earlier in question period at the very beginning, the member for New Westminster Burnaby, I believe, used an expression that everyone in the room knew was an inappropriate sentiment, and was using indirect language to say what he could not say directly. And I just want to raise that to the attention that there are still some of us who have sensibilities about certain words, and we think that, the Speaker should be aware of that. Thank you.
Good point. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby is also raising on a point of order.
No, just in response, Madam Speaker. Of course, if you consult Hansard, you will see many uses of that particular term, which is used in a less derogatory way than the term that was actually used by the Parliamentary Secretary for Children and Families in his Twitter this morning.
I will I will make sure that we relook at the blues to look at the exact language that was used, and we'll come back to the House should I need to do that. Point of order, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member for Saanich Gulf Island asked an extremely good question, and she was very emotional when she asked it. Now, I'm at home in my riding of Oakville North Burlington, but it appeared to me that when the camera went back to the chamber, that there was an awful lot of laughter at the fact that she was emotional about climate change. And I think that's extremely inappropriate, and I think she's a very passionate member of the House, and I don't think that her question should be treated lightly. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I greatly appreciate the information and the clarification that the honourable member and support that the honourable member is providing at this point. I do want to remind all members that whenever someone is delivering a speech in the House or making a statement or asking a question, that there should be respect on all sides of the House for that question. We may not be in agreement or not, or we may be in agreement. However, I think that it's important to allow people to have that, to ask the question and not be responsive unless you are the person that needs to respond to that question. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 32.2, I have the pleasure to table in both official languages the 2019-20 Annual Report for the Green Municipal Fund. I'm also pleased to table, pursuant to subsection 36.1 of the Energy Efficiency Act in both official languages, Smarter Energy Use in Canada report to Parliament under the Energy Efficiency Act for 2018-2019. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Tabling of documents. I understand that the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources has one. Oh, he did both at the same time. Perfect. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Queen's Privy Council of Canada.
For 36 bracket 8A, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's responses to 6 petitions, and these returns will be tabled in an electronic format.
Tabling of documents. Introduction of government bills.
Statements by ministers.
Rapport de
Reports of interparliamentary delegations.
Présentation.
Presenting reports from committees.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Miramichi-Grand Lake.
Speaker, I have the honour to present in both official language the first report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food in relation to the motion adopted on Thursday, October 8, 2020, regarding Business Management Risk Program. Also pursuing to a Standing Order 109, the committee would request that the government table a comprehensive response to this report. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Presenting reports from committees, the Honourable Member for Avalon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honour to present in both official languages the following 3 reports of the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. The first report, entitled Striped Bass in the Southern Gulf of St. Lawrence and Miramichi River, Striking a Delicate Balance. The second report, entitled Aquatic Invasive Species, a National Priority. And the third report, entitled In Hot Water, Lobster and Snow Crab in Eastern Canada. I would like to thank all members of the committee, our clerk, analysts, and indeed all of our staff for their hard work on these reports. The cooperation and collaboration of all members is something our committee is quite proud of. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Presenting reports from committees, the Honourable Member for Brampton North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 104 and 114, and pursuant to the House order made on Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020, I have the honour to present in both official languages the third report of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs regarding the membership of committees of the House. If the House gives its consent, I intend to move concurrence in the third report later this day. Thank you.
Presenting reports from committees. Introduction of private members' bills. Première lecture.
First reading of Senate public bills.
Motion. The honourable member for Brampton North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the House gives its consent, I move that the third report of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs presented to the House earlier this day be concurred in.
Puisqu'il s'agit d'une séance.
This is a hybrid sitting of the House. For clarity, I would only ask those who are against the motion to state that they are in disagreement. Therefore, all those who are against the motion of the honourable member say nay. The House has heard the motion. All those who are against, please say nay. With no dissenting voice, I declare the concurrence of this motion. Motions.
Presenting petitions. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to present a petition today that deals with an issue that has been going on for some time, but the petitioners are requiring and asking the government to consider that the Trans Mountain Pipeline is not in Canada's interest and that public funds should not be spent on pursuing building a pipeline that no longer has markets, that is in less and less competitive position, less and less economically justifiable, and of course violates any commitment to meet climate targets. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Petitions. The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm bringing this petition today on behalf of those who are calling on the House of Commons to pass a criminal code prohibition of sex selection abortion. The rationale is that it is legal in Canada because Canada has no restrictions whatsoever on abortion. And because we have such a commitment to equality between men and women here at home and on the international stage, it's inappropriate that we allow this to take place at the earliest stages of life for baby girls. And they do quote a 2019 Dart and Maru Blue poll that indicates that 84% of Canadians across Canada agree that it should be legal to have abortion if the family does not want the child to be a certain sex. The World Health Organization, United Nations Women, and United Nations Children Fund indicate it's a growing problem internationally, and our own Canadian Medical Association has indicated it's a growing problem in Canada. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The presenting petitions, the honourable member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, many of Canada's musicians and workers in the live music industry are facing extinction and need support, which is why I'm glad to have the opportunity to present a petition from my constituents who value the important role of live music in our communities, in our cultures, and in our lives. They are worried that many of our established musicians and live performance workers will be forced to leave the music industry as a career, and many young musicians and budding techs will never get a start. They're calling for guaranteed financial support for individual musicians and techs into the summer of 2021 to fund and extend the music ecosystem support models and to create project funds that go directly to musicians for developing music content through virtual platforms. Thank you.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today is National Child Day in Canada and World Children Day internationally. So it's an honor and privilege to present e-petition 2667, which has 2,454 signatures. The petitioners note that Canada's foreign policy indicates a priority commitment to protection of the rights of children around the world. They note the Secretary General of the United Nations released his report on children in armed conflict in June 20th, 2019. It reiterated the UN Special Representative's call upon Israel to uphold international juvenile justice standards, as well as to cease the use of administrative detention for children and end all forms of ill treatment in detention, and to cease any attempted recruitment of detained children as informants. The petitioners note that Israel has the distinction of being the only country in the world that automatically and systematically prosecutes children in military courts that lack fundamental fair trial rights and protections. The petitioners are calling upon the Government of Canada to ensure the human rights of Palestinian children are protected by instructing a special envoy to promote monitor, and report on the human rights situation of Palestinian children living in the occupied Palestinian territory and Gaza. Thank you.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In advance of National Housing Day this Sunday, I'm tabling e-petition 2826, where 2,057 people are noting over 235,000 Canadians experience homelessness every year, and 1.7 million households are living in substandard or unaffordable housing. They're calling upon the federal government to adopt the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness Recovery for All plan to end homelessness with timelines and targets, expand federal investments in community-based homelessness responses, meaningfully implement the right to housing, build a minimum of 370,000 new units of supportive and affordable housing, and develop a new homelessness housing benefit. Stop the loss of affordable rental housing to financialization by limiting purchases of distressed housing by large corporate funds, put in place a national guarantee minimum income, and implement a Indigenous-led urban, rural, and northern housing strategy.
Presenting petitions. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, the following questions will be answered today. Question 115, 117, 120, 121, and 123. And then furthermore, Madam Speaker, if the government's response to question 116, 118, 119, and question 122 could be made orders for return, these returns would be tabled immediately.
Is it the pleasure of the House that the aforementioned questions be made orders for return and that they be tabled immediately? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, questions on the order paper?
Please, Madam Speaker, I ask that all remaining questions be allowed to stand.
Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. Questions of the order paper? No more? Request for emergency debates. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As you will know, pursuant to our rules, I submitted a letter yesterday on behalf of myself, but also the member for Nanaimo Ladysmith, the member for Fredericton, and also on behalf of, I say her name out loud, she doesn't yet have a seat in this place, Annamie Paul, leader of the Green Party of Canada. I want to say that we appreciate very much that the Prime Minister convened a briefing, a high-level briefing yesterday for all leaders of the parties assembled in this House of Commons. The information, as we all know, is sobering. In my letter to the Speaker, I identified what I thought was Dr. Tam's most recent projection that we could hit as many as 10,000 cases of COVID a day. It turns out that was one of the more optimistic modeling. If we all do everything we can over the holiday period, if we fail, we could have 60,000 cases a day. This is indeed sobering. Now, some might say this isn't a new emergency. We've been in this emergency since March. I put it to you, Madam Speaker, that we are now in a second wave. The advice is deeply concerning, and medical professionals, and this is a nonpartisan issue, and I plead with people, if we can have an emergency debate, it must be nonpartisan. Canadians want to see us work together, but they also want to know that parliamentarians are seized with this new information and want to work together to give Canadians a coordinated response that brings into play the best advice throughout Canada from our public health officers and others. And I think if we had an emergency debate, Madam Speaker, with only 15 sitting days left in this calendar year 2020, we need to rise to the occasion as parliamentarians and let Canadians know we understand the second wave emergency demands the best of all of us. And I thereby ask you and ask the Speaker's office to grant an emergency debate so that we can bring our best nonpartisan concern for the well-being of all Canadians to the floor of the House of Commons. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands for her intervention. And after careful consideration and looking at the information that she provided and looking into other information, I do not, however, find that the request meets the requirements of the standing orders at this time. Thank you. Orders of the day, ordre du jour.
Orders of the day, Government Orders, Government Bills, Comments, resuming debate at third reading stage of Bill C3, an act to amend the Judges Act and the Criminal Code.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands had 3 minutes of questions and comments left. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Member for Saanich Gulf Islands for her remarks. I'd like to hear her comment. Judges will be required to take training, new judges, but not ones that are already on the bench. I'd like to know if she thinks this will create an incentive to encourage judges who've already been appointed to take the training, because new colleagues will have to do so that judges that are currently on the bench can bring their knowledge up to speed on these issues.
Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Merci.
I thank my colleague for her question. I think that she is right. Clearly, sitting judges also need awareness training on the situation of women who are victims of violence and assault. That's why I hope that it will be possible to have an extension of the objective and the purpose of this bill to include already sitting judges.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Skyview. Oh, no. A brief question. Resuming debate. Oh, sorry. The Honourable Member for Vancouver East has a brief question.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask the member this question. If this kind of training was in place long ago, would you think that the situation in which we have with respect to the missing and murdered Indigenous women could be impacted?
Yeah. For Saanich Gulf Islands, a brief answer, please.
Thank you to the member for Vancouver East. There's so much about the systemic racism that is part of the cultural genocide identified by the inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Certainly the relationship with law enforcement must be taken into account. The fear that marginalized women have of going to someone who's there by their job description to protect them, who may in fact represent a threat. But yes, training for judges would certainly have helped, but I don't think it would be sufficient to avoid the ongoing scandal of the way missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls are treated and our societal response.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Calgary Skyview.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'll be splitting my time with the member for Cumberland Colchester. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today to speak on Bill C3, an act to amend the Judges Act and the Criminal Code. Madam Speaker, this bill is very important to me as a lawyer, as a woman, but also as a Shadow Minister for Women and Gender Equality. As such, I'm pleased to stand in this place and debate this bill. However, I'm disappointed that because of the Prime Minister's continual lapse in ethical judgment, instead of facing scrutiny for his decisions, he chose to probe Parliament, and the casualty was having to reintroduce this bill, meaning victims of sexual assaults still can't get due justice. Shameful. Madam Speaker, Bill C3 adds new eligibilities for lawyers seeking the appointment to the judiciary to require the completion of a recent and comprehensive education in sexual assault law, as well as social context education. It requires the Canadian Judicial Council to submit an annual report to Parliament regarding the details on seminars offered on matters relating to sexual assault law and the number of judges attending. It does this while still maintaining the balance between judiciary independence and a fair criminal justice system, which is something very important to me and to all Canadians. The rationale for the need for this bill is all too familiar, given the recent spotlight on the treatment of sexual assault victims during trial. Sadly, this is certainly not something that is new. So let's explore the current state as it stands now. There is piecemeal training and education available in certain jurisdictions, but it is not mandatory. We saw in 2016, a judge was found to have relied on myths about the expected behavior of a victim of sexual abuse. That case was overturned on appeal for obvious reasons. We've seen instances of judges and the use of insensitive language. For example, in 2014, Justice Camp made a comment in my home city of Calgary to a sexual assault victim, asking her why she couldn't keep her knees close together. Madam Speaker, comments like Justice Camp's are all too familiar and do further lead to the stigma that the courts are not there to protect the victims. In 2019, there were nearly a dozen cases going through Canada's court system that shed light on how some judges continue to rely on myths and stereotypes when informing their decisions on sexual assault cases. Here we are, still seeing similar misinformation about the experience of sexual assault victims or victims of abuse, which can lead to poor decisions and, as we've seen, possible miscarriages of justice, sometimes resulting in new trials. Retrials can be incredibly painful for the complainants, potentially further re-victimizing them, as they have to relive the trauma by constantly retelling lawyers and judges their horrific experience, in some cases preventing them from being able to mentally heal. The way victims are treated during their court proceedings, as well as in the public eye, we know is a major hindrance to reporting the crime in the first place, particularly if the person who committed the assault is someone in a position of authority, or if it is someone they know, a father, brother, or an uncle. Other victims witness how other sexual assault victims are treated in the justice system and are terrified that if they come forward, they would be treated in the same way. Madam Speaker, it is well documented that sexual assault cases are one of the most underreported crimes in Canada. Of reported cases, only 12% results in a criminal conviction within 6 years, compared to 23% of physical assault as reported by Statistics Canada. We know the reasons for underreporting include shame, guilt, and stigma of sexual victimization. Because of this, many victims don't believe that they would see a positive outcome in the justice system, which is why they don't come forward. This simply cannot stand. So, what can we do? The best way to prevent this type of sentiment is through education and training. The path forward that this legislation sets allows for more confidence in the criminal justice system by ensuring lawyers who are appointed to the bench are trained and educated in this very specific type of case. The future state, with this bill passed, is the hope that with education and training, the stories we have once heard of victims being made to feel less than will not be repeated. This legislation is intended to help reduce the stigma of coming forward, of reporting the crime, and seeing justice prevail for the victims. The hope is that with education and training, the victims of sexual assault get treated with respect and avoid at all cost being re-victimized, which can be incredibly traumatizing for the individual, and that other victims can gain confidence in our justice system and feel safe in coming forward. As Ms. Ambrose said in her testimony before the Status of Women Committee, really, for me, it's about building confidence. Women do not have confidence in our justice system when it comes to sexual assault law. This has to change if we are ever going to see an increase in sexual assaults being reported and convicted. And this piece of legislation will bring us one step closer to eliminating barriers and giving victims of sexual assault more confidence to come forward. I hope this bill passes quickly, as this will only move us forward as a society and help grow confidence in our justice system. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Shefford.
The Honourable Member. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Calgary Skyview for her remarks. I sit on the Status of Women Committee with her, and the committee is already examining the bill. For some time now, and we see with the pandemic, that problems of violence against women have worsened, been exacerbated. I'm preparing a petition on behalf of someone, a woman, who has talked about her case of assault, etc. Is it not time, because December is upon us, is it not time, given the importance of the issue, to speak out for victims of sexual assault?
For Calgary Skyview.
I'd like to thank the member opposite for the question, and I do sit on the committee with you, and I enjoy our conversations on this. It is time to start talking about women. What pandemic has done is highlighted, well, we to some extent already knew that this existed, so it's brought all the problems to the surface, and this legislation is a step in the right direction, in the sense that women will feel more comfortable coming out, coming forward, and talking about their experiences without feeling, having the feeling of re-victimization. So that's the whole purpose. And I'm very thankful that this bill is here before the Parliament. All the parties seem to be supporting it, and I just can't wait for it to pass.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, just to pick up on the member's comment, we can't wait for the bill also to pass. And it's really encouraging, like last week we had all party support, Greens, New Democrats, Conservatives, Liberals, supporting the wage subsidy legislation and the rent subsidy assistance program. And it received royal assent just yesterday. It goes to show you just how effective the House can be. And yet we now have another piece of legislation that's before us, and once again receiving all-party support. And if she can just provide her thoughts in terms of just how good it is to see when we have all parties getting behind legislation in hopes that it receives that royal assent too soon.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Skyview.
I'd like to thank the member opposite for the question. It's a different question this time than the usual of hinting on how, previous governments screwed up. Anyways, in regards to Conservative Party has been there for the Canadians. When the Liberals brought in a bill that addressed the concerns and helped Canadians, Conservatives were there for them, cooperating with the Liberal government and passing those bills to make sure that the help gets to Canadians as fast as possible. And in certain instances, also pointing out the deficiencies that were highlighted from our constituents who couldn't meet the criteria for these programs. So yes, definitely in terms of helping Canadians, Conservative Party has been there, and there has been acknowledgement from the other side as well that Conservatives have supported Canadians in this time, and we will continue to do that.
Question, the Honourable Member for Victoria.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've spoken to a number of people in my riding about this bill. I've also spoken to sex workers who disproportionately are impacted by the stereotypes and prejudices in our justice system. And so what they said to me is that, yes, this kind of bill is very important, but they also want politicians to start listening to sex workers, to acknowledge that sex work is work. And I'm wondering about the member's comments on that.
Brief answer from the member for Calgary Skyview.
Well, thank you for that question. in terms of the bill is here before the Parliament and about to get passed, addressing the concerns that women have and women face when accessing the justice system. So I'm going to leave it at that. And this is a step forward in the right direction.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Cumberland's Colchester.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and it is my pleasure today to speak to Bill C-3, an act to amend the Judges Act and the Criminal Code, and this is the third reading. Madam Speaker, I think that Bill C-3 is a bill that should receive all party support, since it's a vital step forward in achieving justice and equity for women and girls who are too many times affected by rape and sexual assault still in our society today, and it is still very much misunderstood and I think is an affront to all women. Bill C-3 would amend the Judges Act to require candidates seeking appointment to a provincial superior court commit to participating in training related to sexual assault law and social context. And this is a critical piece of legislation that's necessary to ensure that judges understand the context in which offending occurs. Thanks to amendments made by the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights, candidates must also commit to participate in training on systemic racism and systemic discrimination. And this is an idea and a bill whose time has come. The bill would also require the Canadian Judicial Council to ensure that those knowledgeable in the field, potentially including sexual assault survivor organizations, are consulted in the development of this new training. The bill would also assist in assuring transparency in judicial decision-making by amending the Criminal Code's sexual assault provisions to include a requirement that judges provide reasons for their decisions, either in writing or in the record of the proceedings. This requirement complements existing legal requirements for reasons, including specific obligations for judges to provide reasons in sexual history evidence. And these amendments are critical to a fair and effective response to sexual assault, which we know disproportionately impacts women and girls. Canada has come a long way in this regard, Madam Speaker. We have one of the most robust sexual assault legal frameworks in the world, but we must not forget the misogynistic myths and stereotypes to which Canada's existing legal and I would say largely patriarchal regime responds, nor the fact that those very same misogynistic myths and stereotypes persist to this day. For example, pre-1983 sexual offending laws were repealed and replaced with the affirmative consent model we now have in place. The previous laws accepted as fact, first of all, that a complainant who fails to resist is in fact consenting, and second, that a complainant who consented to sexual activity with the accused before an alleged sexual assault likely also consented to any subsequent sexual activity. We now know that these are false. They are misogynistic myths and stereotypes that distort the court's ability to seek the truth. We also now know that they have a detrimental impact on victims, who, as I've said, are overwhelmingly women and girls, and that their impact is compounded when they intersect with other discriminatory stereotypes. In particular, they deter women and girls from coming forward to denounce their assailants, which means that those assailants cannot be held accountable. And Madam Speaker, while I was in the legislature in Nova Scotia for 10 years as an MLA, we had a bill come before us, and I rose in the House as the Status of Women critic to discuss the fact of these issues and the fact that too many women and girls were part of the Me Too movement because we have, in fact, been assaulted, sexually assaulted, or raped in our lives, if not once, possibly twice. We never know. And sadly, this is a major crime and should be considered a major crime in Canada. We need help to make sure that the assailants are taken to task and that this does not continue to happen. In Nova Scotia, we had a case where a young woman was raped in a taxi, and the reason given in court that she was drunk, and therefore the judge said, well, even drunk people can consent. Well, she was passed out, Madam Speaker. I don't think a woman who is passed out and in the back of a taxi expecting to be driven home after they've given the address should be held accountable for the male driver stopping the taxi and raping her in the back seat. Madam Speaker, as a staunch feminist and as somebody who has also been sexually assaulted and raped in my lifetime, I can say that these kinds of laws need to be changed and amended, or else more women and girls will not be able to come forward, as I did not 30 years ago. So when a law is misapplied, appeals follow, and perhaps even a new trial will be ordered. And this can significantly lengthen the criminal justice process and continue to harm victims. Victims themselves tell us that their interactions with the criminal justice system are often experienced as re-victimization. It is therefore critically important that sexual assault matters be resolved as quickly, efficiently, effectively, and compassionately as possible. Otherwise, victims will just not want to come forward to denounce these assailants. They will not have confidence in the system that is there supposedly to protect them. So, what can we do about this problem? How can we help our criminal justice system function fairly when addressing one of the most complex and, I would say, abhorrent human behaviors? A behavior that is based on dominance, on aggression, on violence, and on power over. It is not a sexual act in the sense of what some people may call sexy. In fact, it is not. It is violence and it is power over, and it must be stopped. Zero tolerance. So, I believe that all members of this House should support Bill C-3, which would assist in ensuring that judges have the education that they need to understand sexual assault law, to understand what misogyny is, to understand systemic racism, and to be able to make the right decisions so that the right decision is made in each case. And these people who are most impacted by the sexual offending and the social context in which the sexual offending occurs need to have justice, and they need to believe in our legal system, Madam Speaker. And with that, I would just like to add that here in Cumberland Colchester, we have many incredible feminists who are fighting for justice for women and girls. And I'd like to mention a couple of them. Linda McDonald and Jean Sarson in particular have been very, very vocal and very active with regards to laws about non-state torture and about human trafficking, and our need to crack down on the awful actions of the people who are profiting from human trafficking and sex trafficking. And it is our intent to try and bring Canada up into the 21st century so that we can have people who understand what feminism is really all about, and the importance of this, and the importance of understanding where the woman is coming from in these cases. Madam Speaker, as an actor once, I did a scene where I was being raped at knife point, and the director and producer at the spur of the moment wanted me to show my breasts. And they wanted to show a knife cutting into my shirt and showing my breasts. And I said, no, I was not going to do that. I was a young actor, but I stood up for myself. And they said, well, what are we going to do then? We want to show this scene. It needs to be impactful. And I said, well, why don't you just pan up to my face and show how I feel, how the victim feels, instead of trying to titillate an audience with this act of violence and aggression. And Madam Speaker, that is in fact what we did. And that is the kind of thinking that Canada needs and more creatives need as well, so that we can stamp out this awful behavior. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you very much. And to the member, thank you so much for sharing your story. That is so impactful. And knowing that we have a woman who stands in this House of Commons and is able to share that makes us know that we're doing our job. So thank you very much to that member for sharing that story. One of the concerns that I have right now, and I've seen happening, the discussions on with COVID delays, this is because this has to do with the women as well. With COVID delays, is there concern that some of these cases might be thrown out as well? So not just looking at Bill C-3, but what's going to happen if some people are outside of that normal time, like that 18 months? What do you think the government can do, or what should we be doing to make sure that these women find justice?
The honourable member for Cumberland Colchester.
Well, thank you very much to my colleague for the question. And I too am concerned about this. As a woman who's gone through it, I know that 30 years is a long time to have no justice and to be able to look back and say, I would have, should have, could have. But I believe that anybody who's been assaulted sexually or in any other way needs to have the justice done. And in Nova Scotia, we passed laws whereby you could go back actually 20 years. So I believe that something like this should also be considered in this particular case. It's an emergency situation, and women should not suffer because of that. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Shefford.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Cumberland, Colchester, Nova Scotia, for her very emotional speech about her lived experience. She talked about film. I saw a film recently, which is a real feminist fresco, and she talked about the importance of bringing things up to date in the 21st century. And I spoke to an Australian feminist recently to talk about judicial training. And I'd like my colleague to tell us about how this bill won't solve all problems, but now women in Quebec and Canada can expect to have more sensitive judges hearing their cases. The honourable member for Cumberland Colchester.
Well, again, I want to thank my honourable colleague for her words. And in fact, I come from Australia originally, and I'm well aware of Australian film, which is very, very strong. And part of the reason we moved to Canada when I was a kid was because my mom and dad felt that it was very sexist and very racist in Australia at that time, and Canada was a beacon. We came over with 2,000 Australian teachers, actually on a boat that had 2,000 Australian teachers in 1968 because Pierre Elliott Trudeau asked for teachers to come to Canada. There was a lack of teachers. I think that any step forward is a good one. Obviously, most feminists, we would like to see things go rapid fire. And there are many other things that we can do and should do. And I would be very happy to work with the member and talk about what other things we can do and we can introduce here, all parties. So I would put that out to her and say, let's get together and let's talk about what else we can do. I'm very interested to talk with her and come up with some conclusions. Thank you. Merci. J'apprécie beaucoup.
We have time for a brief question. The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for her comments and sharing her lived experiences with all of us. While this bill is important, and I hope that it will pass through the House, the other issue, of course, that weighs heavily on me is the 231 calls for action with respect to the missing murdered Indigenous women and girls. The government promised that in its anniversary of the release of those calls to action, a national action plan led by Indigenous women would actually be available. Yet we don't have such a plan. I'd like to know what the members' comments are about that and what can be done to get the government to put forward that plan and not use COVID as an excuse.
The honourable member for Cumberland Colchester, a brief answer, please.
Well, thank you very much. And again, thank you very much to my honorable colleague. As a matter of fact, I am on the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee, and yesterday Minister Bennett came to our committee and actually answered that question and said it's coming out very shortly that we will be having a national strategy. And I do believe her. I've enjoyed working with her, and I know that we are all very frustrated with the delay. I have a wonderful First Nations community within my riding, Millbrook First Nations, and I work very closely with the Nova Scotia Native Women's Association there. Karen Pictou, a shout out to her. But we need to move forward on this. The time has come, and women demand it, and we deserve it. So I will work with that member as well to make sure that this happens in a very timely fashion. Thank you.
Resuming debate. Reprise de débat. Reprise de débat. Is the House ready for the question? Question, yes. The question is as follows. Mr. Lametti, seconded by Mr. Sagen, move that Bill C3, an act to amend the Judges Act and the Criminal Code, be now read a third time and do pass. Si un député d'un parti reconnu.
If a member of a recognized party present in the House wishes to request a recorded division or that the motion be adopted on division, I would invite them to rise and indicate so to the chair.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I would request a recorded vote, please.
Okay. Okay, ça, j'ai pas besoin de ça. Therefore, pursuant to order, request has been made for a recorded vote. Pursuant to order made on Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020, the division stands deferred until Monday, November 23rd, 2020, at the expiry of the time provided for oral questions. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary is rising on the point of order.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I suspect if you were to canvass the House, you would find unanimous consent to call at 1:30 at this time, so we could begin private members' hour.
Does the Honourable Member have unanimous consent to see the clock at 1:30? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered.
It being 1:30, the House will now deal with private members' business according to today's order paper.
Ordre du jour,
Orders of the day, private members' business.
35, instruction to the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development, environment grading label, standing in the name of Mr. Batiste.
Mr. Batiste, seconded by Monsieur Lamoureux, moves that the House recognizes that Canadians understand that climate change represents a threat to our way of life and are looking for opportunities where they can make a difference in their day-to-day lives.
Number 2, Canadian consumers want and deserve to know the environmental impacts of the products they purchase. So, dispense.
Debate. The Honourable Member for Sydney Victoria.
Madam Speaker, today I have the privilege of speaking to my motion M35, which, if adopted, would launch a study on the creation of an environmentally conscious labeling regime. Madam Speaker, if you would, indulge me and envision a Canada where a consumer can walk into a store and pick up two similar products and imagine that through a trusted label on the package that they choose the product that is better for our environment and our future. Imagine a Canada where consumers know each day what their carbon footprint is by the choices they make that day, as well as other important environmental factors. Imagine going into restaurants across Canada and seeing a consistent environmental grade to help those who wish to make environmentally friendly choices. Madam Speaker, climate change represents an existential threat to our way of life and our prosperity. It is a challenge of our time, and addressing it will require a Canadian-wide approach. Let me be clear. Government has an important role to play. Industry has a role to play. And yes, individuals, each and every one of us, all have a role to play. I believe Canadians understand this. They are able, they are willing. Put simply, Canadians, if given the opportunity, will make choices every day that help slow the effects of climate change. While it is true that emissions are largely driven by our largest businesses, those businesses are driven in part by us, the consumers. Some farmers have suggested that every time we pick up a fork or spoon, we are voting. We are making a choice for our future. Our actions and our choices in day in, day out may only have incremental impacts, but together we can drive large-scale change through individual responsibility and the global marketplace. The policy and vision being proposed today is a study of an environmental grading label, a label that takes into account factors like greenhouse gas emissions, energy and water usage, and waste created. Such a label on products would encourage buying local and would have a positive economic impact for our country while empowering everyday Canadians to do their part in the struggle against climate change. Imagine for a moment that on the label, just below the calories and ingredients, the carbs, that there was a clear indicator of a product's environmental impact. Imagine being at a grocery store and being able to compare the environmental impacts of two brands of canned meat right there in the aisle. In a world of more choice and options when shopping, you can choose organic, local, and Canadian raised. The next step is to give consumers opportunities to spend their money on choices with less environmental impact. Colleagues, having that information available, presented clearly and concisely, and being empowered to make the environmental choice if you want to. Colleagues, that's what environmentally friendly labeling is about, empowering consumers through information so that they can make the choices that reflect their beliefs. I first tabled this motion in February of 2019. The world looked very different back then. And if you had told me the next time I would be speaking in Parliament, this motion, it would be from my dining room table, I probably wouldn't have believed you. And yet, I speak today from my home as a result of a global crisis. We already know that a climate crisis is on the horizon. Many would say it is already here. The United Nations has been clear on our need to cut our carbon footprint in half globally within 10 years. The UN Secretary General has stated there has never been a more important time to listen to science. Failure to heed these warnings and take drastic actions to reverse emissions means we will continue to witness deadly and catastrophic heat waves, storms, and pollutions. We've heard the alarm bell sounding for decades, and yet Canadians often feel there is nothing they can do personally to stop it. Environmental labeling would give them that capability. The motion I present today is just one part of the solution. This I know, but it's a vision for a better Canada that empowers consumers with the ability to make an environmentally friendly choice every day. This motion came about because of the concerns I've heard from my constituents across Cape Breton about the largest crisis facing our future. The youth in my riding and ridings across Canada are frightened of the future we are leaving to them. And indeed, I agree that the burden we have left to future generations is unfair. But we can take steps to change that as leaders. We can make a better world. The battle is not lost. Canada can help lead that battle. As I've said, Canadians are looking for a way that they can contribute. But when facing challenges like climate change, one that is systemic and global, it can seem overwhelming. Businesses around the world have recognized this shift and realized that consumers want to act. Let me give you a few examples. The Shelton Group, a sustainability-oriented ad agency, has noted that people want to do their part, but the problem can seem too enormous. A recent study by Ogilvy Earth Division found that while that more than 80% of American shoppers claim to want to make more sustainable choices, many don't. Another study has similar results, with 87% of consumers concerned about environmental impacts of their personal buying habits. There is no singular reason for this discrepancy, but it is clear that one of the biggest contributing factors is awareness. A survey by McKinsey and Company showed that while consumers want to do their part, they do not know how to act on that belief. The study noted in particular that many attempts to label green products have been meaningless at best and confusing at worst. On top of that, there just isn't any consistency. In many cases, these labels are useless to the consumer and vague. It is unclear what standards are being used and if consistent across the country. We need to begin to have a consistent standard on what it is to have green or environmentally friendly products. To quote then CEO Steve Howard of Climate Group, referring to one attempt to label a product based on a life cycle analysis, he asked, "What does it mean to say a bag of chips contains 70 grams of carbon?" He continued to say, "I have a PhD in environmental physics, and it does not mean a thing to me." In other cases, the labeling regimes resemble a PR exercise more than an attempt to communicate any quantifiable or qualitative information about the product. Worse, because of limited and haphazard adoption of this practice, mostly by bigger companies, local businesses who many cases would be major beneficiaries of greater consumer awareness are left behind. Local farmers and businesses, by virtue of being local, are often the best choice for our environment. But they are often left in the dust by large farm factories and companies who can pour significantly more PR dollars into packaging and communications. This is a place where the government can step up. This is where we, as legislators, have a clear role to fulfill. The government has a long-standing role in mandating that companies present information to consumers on the basis of public health, public interest, and democratic will. The environmental impact of the products we consume clearly fulfills all three of these criteria. Moreover, Parliament is in the unique position to be able to bring together experts and stakeholders from across industry and academia to determine not only what information should be considered in such a labeling regime, but how to express it to the consumer in a manner that is clear, concise, and comprehensible for everyday Canadians. As such, this motion would empower a standing committee to summon industry, summon small business, summon environmental experts, academics, farmers to come up with a collaborative way forward. This committee mandate would be tasked with reporting to the House their recommendations on how we can move forward as legislators in creating a labeling regime. The labeling regime would empower and inform consumers while benefiting local economies and incentivizing greener business practices from our biggest companies. An environmental labeling regime would help make Canada a world leader in fighting climate change. It is a bold and practical step forward to address climate change. It would bring greater legitimacy to our efforts to lead on the world stage. It would set an example for green transparency and consumer rights. It would truly be a cultural shift of monumental proportions. Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve to know the environmental impacts of the products they purchased so that they can make informed decisions. Growing up in Cape Breton and growing up listening to people who care about our beautiful ecosystem and ensuring quality of life for future generations is vital. I was taught from Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers that the choices we make today must take into consideration the next 7 generations. I was taught that we are connected to our environment. Whatever we do to environment, we do to ourselves. What I am proposing is taking an important step towards environmental reconciliation. Government studies and motions can be a vision for a better tomorrow. This motion ensures a proactive role by bringing together consumer interests in Canadian business to create a clear and concise metric by which Canadians can consider the impacts of their buying habits. This will empower Canadians by helping make environmental choices every day to protect our environment and our future. Madam Speaker, I believe that if Canadians were informed about things like the waste created, water used, and greenhouse emissions of the products they purchase, that they would make better choices for future generations. I believe that when industries see the Canadians consumers want to do their part, that they too will make the necessary changes to their products. I believe that this motion, if passed, is a win for our planet, for our country, for Canadian businesses, and for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Thank you. Walalio. Merci.
Questions and comments? The honour member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I certainly appreciate all members when they bring their individual private members' motions or private members' bills to this place. It's an opportunity for members of Parliament to show where their priorities are. But I'd like to ask the member, Madam Speaker, by utilizing the term all products in Canada, what is this saying to small micro entrepreneurs who, let's just say, assemble small jewelry or crafts? What about restaurants that right now that are struggling and want to put out a new product, perhaps a house salad dressing or vinaigrette? Why would they have to go through the cost of figuring out how much water they use, how much greenhouse gas emissions there are in the product? To me, it seems that this member is asking for these small micro businesses that are already suffering under COVID-19 to bear a lot of red tape.
Honourable member for Sydney Victoria.
I thank the member opposite for his comments. Just this week, I went to a farm where I purchased meat, I purchased vegetables, and from local farmers. None of these had the nutritional guides on it that Canadians have said is law. I think that when you go to flea markets, where you go into small business, this is not the burden that we're placing on them. However, I would add that local and farms and local businesses are the ones who will benefit the most from this, because they are in as fast by local are probably the most environmentally friendly. And this is something that a study can really dive into and ensure that we're making sure that we're not burdening small and medium-sized enterprises with this.
The honourable member for Repentigny. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I read the motion tabled by the member. I wonder if he knows that eco-labelling already exists. I found that in his motion he did not take into account the role played by Quebec and other provinces in managing eco-labelling. So, what does he think about this all?
Member for Sydney Victoria.
I'd like to thank the member for her question. And indeed, there are a number of restaurants, there are a number of provinces, there are a number of places taking leadership on that. But the problem is they're inconsistent. And what I'm proposing is a Canada-wide labeling program that is consistent. And I understand that there are different eco-labeling, but it's just too confusing to the consumers. And what we're looking for is clear and concise, consumer-friendly information just by looking at the package and understanding what that means. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Victoria.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you to the member for bringing forward this motion. It is unclear how effective eco-labeling really is on influencing consumer behavior and ultimately on reducing environmental impacts. A study from the UK ultimately recommended that companies be required to modify the source of their products rather than rely on consumer decisions. Eco-labels could be good for consumer choice and demand for more sustainable products to help push producers to create more environmentally friendly products. But my concern is the focus on the individual here, especially when we have a government who recently put forward a climate bill that had no target for 2025, no accountability for 10 years, when we have a government who bought a pipeline and who has taken decades to modernize the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. The member opposite talked about eco-labels being inconsistent. Well, this government is inconsistent, and I'm wondering how he stands behind that.
The honourable member for Sydney Victoria.
I'd like to thank the member for her comment. And, you know, one of the things that I can only share from my experience of being a member of Parliament for a year is that we all have a role to play moving forward. But I've been Mi'kmaq for my entire life, and Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous knowledge holders have told Canadians for generations that we need to do more for our environment, that we need to foster those relationships that we create. In fact, Indigenous scholars are out there asking for now environmental reconciliation. We all have a role to play in this. And I hope that this is something that we can look towards and saying, this is a positive step, along with all the other things that we're doing. And I'm proud of the fact that I have a government that just yesterday stepped up and made sure that in the future that we will have accountability for environmental, for our environment. Thank you very much.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the chance to speak about this motion from the member for Sydney Victoria. I would like to start by saying I agree with the beginning of the motion that says Canadians are looking for opportunities to make an environmental difference in their day-to-day lives. Also, more information is certainly a good thing. However, this motion and its goals have serious problems that I'd like to speak about today. It is undoubtedly true that a great many consumers use and like products every day that have labels that mark them as environmentally friendly. These labeling regimes are virtually all voluntary and it's each company that decides if it's going to participate and if that's in its best interest. Certainly a great many do, and that's an example of the market at work. Now, from eco-logo to marine stewardship to organic produce, these voluntary labeling regimes have been very advantageous for a great many businesses. Indeed, a report from the OECD on labeling regimes like the one proposed by the member states that except for labeling related to energy efficiency, virtually every regime is voluntary. However, the language in the motion related to recommend a consumer-friendly environment grading label on all products available to Canadian consumers, end quote, is full of pitfalls. First, that the motion instructs the committee to recommend a regime. There is no allowance that the committee could study various regimes and then decide to not recommend any labeling. Committees must be allowed to determine the results of their own studies.
Second of all, while it is important that any regulation be consumer-friendly, there is no reference at all to being production or industry-friendly in this motion. Any eventual regulations must be designed to ensure that those on the producer side are not unfairly punished. And for those who think that I'm only talking about big business, allow me to give an example of how this system could hurt small businesses. The member refers to a labelling regime or system that would affect all products in Canada, which, by my reckoning, means that it would be mandatory. The motion also refers to the aspects that would be part of this system, including greenhouse gas emissions, water, and energy consumption. This proposal could have a devastating impact on Canada's small businesses. For example, someone who operates an Etsy store as a side job and makes their own jewellery. Will this entrepreneur now have to include lifetime greenhouse gas emissions in the small jewellery he or she sells? What about a small family restaurant that decides to bottle and sell their homemade sauce? Will they have to hire a consultant to measure and calculate lifetime energy and water consumption from this product in order to meet labeling requirements? I expect the member to imagine huge companies that can do those calculations much more easily when he tabled this motion. However, when the motion deals with a system that applies to all products in Canada, we are talking about products in Canada. The ultimate effect of such a system would be to almost complete destruction of small product-based Canadian businesses. There is absolutely no way that they could comply with such a system.
And what else would do is create a booming industry for consultants at the expense of higher consumer prices as business struggled to comply with these rules and the added costs. Now, the member from Sydney Victoria may say, that's not the situation I want. That's why I'm calling for a study. Well, but then why so clearly lay out in the motion that he expects the committee to, and I quote, recommend a consumer-friendly environment grading label on all products available to Canadian consumers, end quote. He doesn't say, look into the regimes and see what are best practices. He says to recommend a regime that applies to all products. If the member disagrees with my interpretation, then he's perfectly willing to perhaps amend his own motion to make this abundantly clear. I would now like to briefly touch on the regimes that already exist and why strictly voluntary regimes are ideal. The Global Eco-Label Index lists 456 different regimes globally that address various environmental measures. I've given a few examples earlier, but many of these will be well known to Canadians. For example, the organic label has long been used by producers and consumers to make buying choices. It's completely voluntary, and many choose to use it. Ecologo is another one used in Canada that shows a product is among the top 20% most environmentally friendly products in the market. Now, I know dining in restaurants is down now, but I am sure many people will recognize the Oceanwise symbol that demonstrates seafood that meets certain sustainability principles. I give all of these examples, Madam Speaker, to show that these labels are not a bad thing. The issue is when they are forced upon companies without understanding of the impacts. I completely support any producer or company who believes that applying and complying with these regimes is the best for their business. Madam Speaker, I also completely support any consumers who wish to make their buying decisions based on that information. That is the free market at work, a willing buyer and a willing seller. But what I don't support is a top-down Ottawa knows best regulation that removes producer choice and destroys small businesses. An OECD report states that the negatives of mandatory regimes like those being considered in this motion is that they have huge compliance costs and increased complexity of supply chains. Un régime obligatoire à l'échelle du
A mandatory Canada-wide regime that requires small and medium-sized businesses to track this information would be completely impossible to comply with and would destroy so many businesses that are barely surviving the pandemic. StatsCan data shows that the self-employed, many of whom would be affected, continue to bear the brunt of the pandemic on their businesses. This Liberal plan would kick them when they're already down. Let's not do that and instead find ways to support our struggling businesses. I would be remiss if I did not mention my frustration with the use of House motions to control committee agendas. I spoke about this in the context of M34 just a few weeks ago. I sit on the Environment Committee, and each party has some excellent studies to propose, and we have little time. It's not appropriate for a member of Parliament who is not even on the committee to move a motion that would require 12 meetings. 12, Madam Speaker. This motion would cripple the committee for months at a time when we have a lot of important work to do today. the mover of the previous motion was willing to amend the motion to make it more acceptable in this regard. And I wonder if this member would be open to the same thing. A motion that directs a committee to recommend a plan is not appropriate and not a valid study. If the intent of the motion was to study the operation of this voluntary plan and let the committee decide the number of meetings, then we would be in a different situation. But as I said, I'm very concerned about this motion and its impact on Parliament and Canadian businesses, especially small businesses, Madam Speaker, that are working hard to thrive, attacking entrepreneurs. Your time is up.
Alors, peut-être à la prochaine lecture.
Maybe at next reading.
Mais je veux féliciter le député pour son français.
I would like to congratulate the member for his French. He's made a great deal of progress.
Reprise de débat, l'honorable.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Repentigny. Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank our colleague from Sydney, Victoria, for the intent behind his motion. As environment critic, I am concerned about government action and the quality of policies chosen, but I must nevertheless point out the shortcomings in this motion. First of all, the Bloc Québécois is opposed to M35, even though it considers that environmental labeling has its virtues, and the existence of this mechanism is relevant because over the past 40 years there has been growth in the number of eco-labels. But the wording of this motion calls for 12 meetings. That would take a lot of time. The wording of the motion itself poses a number of, shall we say, irregularities, starting with the fact that it identifies the government as having the jurisdiction to create, and I quote, a clear and precise mechanism to assess the impact of consumption patterns. That's not the role of a government to operationalize that. So the wording is so vague that there have been many documents written on it. Eco-labeling already exists, so the rigidity of the system brings forth the three different types of system we have: certification, self-declaration, and environmental production declaration. In Quebec, for example, there are 10 certification organizations related to construction and renovation, another 10 for residential and industrial cleaning products, 8 for electronic devices, 13 for the food sector, and the list goes on. The motion ignores the role played by Quebec in the management of a responsibility over eco-labeling. And it would be impossible to cover all of these. And it couldn't apply to all consumer goods either, because each sector and each subsector has its own unique characteristics. You don't analyze environmental viability or carbon footprint of a food or fish in the same way you do as a household appliance. And if we were to, that would be quite something. I'd like to point out that Canada imports a great number of products, and the wording of this motion would have these goods under consideration as well. Each organization behind a logo must provide clear information on the criteria applied to authorize the use of its logo, and this information must be accessible to the consumer. The criteria behind a logo cannot be standardized. From a commercial point of view, products that display such an eco-friendly affiliation promote it. Their manufacturers have made efforts, organizational and financial efforts, and put in place procedures to have the privilege of indicating their environmental probity. To a large extent, they undertake the process knowing that their market segment will be sensitive to it. In other words, there's an important business component to consider in this ecosystem, that is eco-labeling. Consumer appreciation for the companies that participate in this good corporate relationship is real and growing. And I think that that is very good news. But that means that consumers in Quebec and Canada and around the world, where systems exist, can make choices. For the average citizen, sensitive to environmental issues caused by the goods they consume, eco-labeling will generate a sense of satisfaction, it will comfort them in their values, and it will help with environmental protection. And some consumers only buy certified products. Having a company adhere to a certification process is like progress that it commits to accomplishing, and that's not insignificant. Let's talk about companies that have implemented ISO 14000. The Quebec Standardization Office, the expert on this standard and its implementation in Quebec, knows the positive impact for thousands of companies. Some labels even come with other aspects. M35 gives the impression that eco-labeling is non-existent, but nothing could be further from the truth. The Quebec Department of the Environment's website has information on this. The Competition Bureau of Canada has also been working closely with the Canadian Standards Council on this. And yes, Canada has national expertise in standardization. And to understand what M35 wants to implement, we must work within a standardization framework. And considering this type of framework would be important to prevent greenwashing. To obtain logos or accreditations related to the environment, the dimension of this type of framework is omnipresent. Now, I'm not disclosing anything major to members by saying that we already know the impact of several sectors of the economy. We need to avoid excluding the potential of eco-labeling and the green shift that's needed. But we need to focus on sector-specific actions like developing energy efficiency and recovery in all sectors, requiring Canadian manufacturers to optimize their production with processes that are safe for the environment, human health. Emphasize work on updating chemical products to be banned and monitoring production conditions in this industrial sector, promoting organic and responsible agriculture and livestock farming practices where proximity production destination is a priority, and supporting production activities that make a place in the life cycle for their products. So there are many areas that we could take action. Now, I'd like to shift gears a little bit here and say that the colleague contextualizes his motion by saying that Canadians, and I quote, know that climate change is a significant threat to their way of life and are looking for ways to make a difference in their daily lives. Individual responsibility is commendable, and guiding our consumer choices based on our values is laudable as well. We buy, we assume. Members of the government should stop pointing fingers at citizens for their climate action and turn to the big players, those who have a real impact on the outcome of what is affecting us. The oil and gas sector, the nuclear sector. We need to see legislation with teeth to enable us to achieve our objectives. And I can't wrap up my remarks without mentioning another type of labeling of GMOs. Now, I know that we're not asking whether or not that creates greenhouse gas emissions, but we're talking about the food that we eat. However, if there is one eco-labeling issue that warrants our attention, it is the labeling of GMOs. The vast majority of Quebecers have been calling for this for many years, for 10 years. And the requests for labeling in this area have always been denied. Since 1997, for 23 years, And in 2004, legislation was strengthened in Quebec. And in Europe, Europeans can know exactly what they're eating, but why can't we know that here? What is harmful, to use the term chosen for the motion, is already fairly convincing. We have seen on many occasions that the government has passed the buck when it comes to taking action on the threats posed by climate change. We get elected, we take responsibility, we make promises, we should keep them. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Victoria.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canadians understand the threat of climate change and biodiversity loss. They want to be better consumers and make more sustainable choices. And environmental grading labels, or eco-labels, could provide Canadians with information about environmental impacts of products and allow them to make more informed choices. This could also incentivize producers to create more environmentally friendly and sustainable products to meet consumer demand. But we need to ensure that the burden of environmental protection does not fall on individuals alone. Any consumer labeling should always be coupled with strong regulatory standards and real climate action. The possibility of having the government implement an across-the-board environment grading label that includes greenhouse gas emissions, water and energy usage, and waste creation is certainly an interesting idea. Worldwide, there are 456 eco-labels in 199 countries, covering 25 industry sectors. These labels cover a wide range of environmental criteria for products from cosmetics to cleaning products, home and garden, or to clothing and paper products. Some eco-labels are created and managed on a national level, while others are international in scope. They may be based on a narrow set of considerations or a more complex full life cycle assessment. Consumers who want to make more environmentally friendly choices often have trouble recognizing the meaning of the wide range of labels they are faced with. It's not always obvious which specific environmental claims are true, what they mean, what assurances exist, if any, regarding their accuracy. While consumers distrust private businesses to provide credible environmental info, they do trust governments and environmental NGOs to provide that information. If the government were to play a role in implementing an environmental grading label for all products and services available to Canadian consumers, it could go a ways to address some of these issues. But it's also unclear how effective eco-labeling really is on influencing consumer behavior, and ultimately our goal of reducing the environmental impacts. As I mentioned, a study from the UK ultimately recommended that companies be required to modify the source of their products rather than rely on consumer decisions. Eco-labels could be good for consumer choice and increase demand for sustainable products, could help push producers to create more environmentally friendly products. But these labels should be attached to strong regulatory standards, so we're not just relying on consumers to shop defensively. We need to ensure that the burden of environmental protection and climate action does not fall on individuals. We should be taking strong action to strengthen regulatory standards and enforcement. We also need to be better on producer accountability, especially when it comes to plastics. The modernization and strengthening of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, CEPA, is one way that this can be done, and it's a very important way. The Canadian Environmental Protection Act, its purpose is to prevent pollution and protect the environment and human health. It sets out rules for preventing and regulating toxic substances and for managing pollution. But CEPA is out of date and badly in need of reform. The House of Commons Standing Committee on the Environment and Sustainable Development reviewed CEPA in 2017 and made 87 recommendations to strengthen and modernize this act. But so far, the government has failed to act. One of those recommendations is that it's time to finally enshrine the right to a healthy environment in law. This is so important, and I want to give a shout out to the member from Winnipeg Centre who put forward a motion not only to enshrine the right to a healthy environment in law, but make sure that the foundation is built upon a recognition of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Too often, vulnerable and marginalized populations bear a disproportionate burden of environmental harm, and CEPA lacks provisions to protect those who have been made vulnerable and to safeguard against environmental injustice. We need protections for people who are inequitably impacted, including frontline workers, women, children, and the elderly, people living in pollution hotspots, too often Indigenous communities. The NDP would like to see an environmental Bill of Rights that will ensure that all Canadians can enjoy a guarantee to clean water, land, and air. These are the changes my NDP colleagues and I have been pushing for, but I also want to acknowledge two exceptional young people from my riding of Victoria who have been advocating for environmental rights since they were 7 and 10 years old. They have created a petition with the House of Commons urging the federal government to update CEPA, including amendments to recognize environmental rights in Canada. Today is the last day for the petition to be open for signatures. It has already gained 8,000 signatures from people across the country. I am awed, inspired, and thankful for the leadership that Franny and Rupert have shown in their advocacy. But young people shouldn't have to be advocating for these rights. Their government should be leading the way on protecting our environment and our health. When it comes to waste creation, Canadians thought they were doing their part when it came to recycling, but it turns out less than 10% of plastics disposed of by Canadians every year are recycled. And it's now clear that recycling alone is not enough. We need to also stop producing so much waste. Almost half of the plastic produced in Canada is from packaging, yet packaging is not included in the government's plan for a ban on the use of plastics. Dealing with our waste does not just mean disposing of it or recycling it. We need leadership on waste reduction targets and a plan to get to a zero waste Canada. In order to do that, producer accountability when it comes to the production of plastics is critical. Canada is not anywhere close to being on track to meeting its climate targets. And we know that those targets are not adequate to achieve the greenhouse gas reductions that we need to avoid catastrophic climate change. We're not even close, which is, I guess, the reason why the government is trying to avoid accountability for the next 10 years. The scope of the cuts to carbon emissions is so beyond what the government thinks is achievable, and it is definitely beyond what this bill and eco-labeling attempts to do through making more sustainable purchasing choices. Canadians want to do their part, but we should be careful not to emphasize individual purchasing choices over the bold systemic changes we need to address the climate crisis. We need to end fossil fuel subsidies. We need to implement real climate accountability, and we need to invest in sustainable jobs and a low-carbon future. Canadians understand that the threat of climate change and biodiversity loss poses a great existential threat to our environment, to our health, to our communities, and to our future. They want to be able to make better, more environmentally sustainable choices, but they also expect their government to do its part in protecting our land, air, and water. And one way of doing that is by setting strong environmental standards and requiring producer accountability. The burden of environmental protection can't fall on individuals alone, and we need to prioritize taking strong action to strengthen regulatory standards, modernizing CEPA, and taking bold action on the climate crisis. We cannot keep putting off action on the climate crisis. Canadians are worried about their future. Parents shouldn't have to worry about the air that their children breathe. And students and young people shouldn't have to march in the streets just to draw attention to the crisis that is happening because politicians and people in leadership positions aren't protecting their future. You know, the recent Climate Accountability Bill was a good step forward, but it's not enough. This Eco-labeling bill is an interesting idea, but we need to focus on what our priorities are, especially in the upcoming 10 years, which is why it's so egregious that this government has left out a 5-year milestone target, has put off accountability for the next decade, the most critical decade. You know, Jack Layton was the first person to put forward a climate accountability bill in the House, and he would not want us to wait another 10 years to see accountability. We need to push this government to take real climate action. We need investments in good jobs, in the kind of good, long-term, sustainable jobs of the future. I want to thank the member again for putting forward this motion, but I think we need to focus on what is important to Canadians, and that is real climate action.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to speak. I'm honored to rise today in support of my friend and colleague, the Honourable Member for Sydney Victoria, on his private member's motion, an instruction to the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. I'd like to thank the learned member for passionately bringing forward this considered motion and for his continued and tireless hard work in helping Canadians understand the environmental impacts of the products they buy and use. Our government shares the honourable member's concerns about the negative impacts of climate change and pollution, and we know that Canadians from coast to coast to coast are eager to take action on these important issues. When given accurate and accessible information, Canadians are eager in their day-to-day lives to make informed decisions about their health and the environment. Our government has already taken important steps to equip Canadians with clear, accurate, and objective information they need to understand the environmental impacts of the products they purchase and to confront the growing global crisis that is climate change. Madam Speaker, Canadians have long understood that more informative labeling and packaging can lead to more informed consumer decisions. Since 2007, when nutritional labeling became mandatory, Canadians have had the opportunity to make informed decisions about the food they put in their bodies. Nutrition labeling has been designed to be easy to find, simple to read, and to permit Canadians to make informed food choices. Essential information, such as where the food was grown, prepared, and packaged, has proven incredibly popular, as have counts of calories, vitamins, minerals, and preservatives, all of which, I might add, have been calculated to single servings. Now, Madam Speakers, Canadians want the same level of ease to find information about the environmental impact of consumer products when it comes to exercising their purchasing power. Just as Canadians want to know what they are putting in their bodies, they also want to know of their footprint on the environment. Instead of counting calories, they are counting carbon. Instead of asking what preservatives are in their food, they want to know how much particulate matter is in the air. And instead of protein, they are asking about pollution. Not all Canadians have weight loss goals, Madam Speaker, but almost all Canadians do have waste less goals. As always, Madam Speaker, our government understands that protecting the environment and growing the economy go hand in hand. Having access to this information could also help support Canada's transition to a circular economy. Moving towards a circular economy means focusing on new innovative approaches and technologies to create economic opportunities out of materials that might otherwise be thrown away as waste, while at the same time promoting innovative product and commodity designs that can easily lead to reuse or recycling. Canadians are already making environmentally responsible choices when they shop, and they want to play an active role in minimizing the environmental impacts of the products they buy and use. This is why so many cities and municipalities have taken steps to ban single-use plastic bags, and why we're seeing a wave of zero waste groups on social media. Madam Speaker, Canadians have said they are willing to pay more for sustainable products. While this shows that Canadians are ready to take strong action to protect the environment and to fight climate change, our government does not believe that Canadians should have to pay for making the right choices. This is why the Government of Canada has introduced the Climate Action Incentive as part of our plan to put a price on pollution and combat climate change. Madam Speaker, Canadians take these issues very seriously and are interested in knowing about the ingredients in the products they buy and how they can safely recycle products after their use and reuse. Canadians want the information they are looking for to be accessible, easy to find, and without the use of extra packaging. At this moment, Canadians are also keenly aware of affordability and competitiveness, as is our government. Consequently, the motion put forward by the honourable member would enable members and Canadians to better understand how product labeling can empower Canadians to take further action on important issues such as greenhouse gas emissions, water and energy usage, and waste generation. There is a lot of interest in the role of labeling. There is also a need to better understand both the ways in which it can be useful and some of the practical challenges associated with broader use of labeling requirements. I think the motion could be broadening its scope to include possible topics such as chemicals in products, recyclability, durability, and digital labeling. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I move that the motion be amended by A, replacing, in quotes, and subsection B, the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development be changed to B, the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology be instructed to. B, replacing subsection 3, schedule no fewer than 12 meetings for the study to be changed to subsection 3, schedule no fewer than 6 meetings for the study. And C, adding in part B, subsection 2, after waste creation, the following chemicals and products, recyclability and durability, and which labeling to avoid increasing the need for packaging. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
In order to propose an amendment, the author of the amendment of the bill needs to be in favor of the amendment. Therefore, I would respectfully ask the honourable member for Sydney Victoria if he is in favor of the amendment. The honourable member for Sydney Victoria.
I am, Madam Speaker, and I would like to thank the Parliamentary Secretary for Industry, Science and Technology for his comments and for his really well thought out amendments.
So this is as per Standing Order 93.3. Therefore, given that there is consent, the amendment is in order. Mr. Asasi, seconded by Mr. Lamoureux, moved that the motion be amended by A, replacing and sub B, the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development with the following, and sub B, the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology, and B, replacing sub 3, schedule, the 3 I's, schedule to fewer than 12 meetings for the study with the following, schedule no fewer than 6 meetings for the study, and C, adding in part B, sub 2, after waste creation, the following, chemicals in products, recyclability and durability, and which labeling could also include digital labeling to avoid increasing the need for packaging. The amendment is in order. Resuming debate, the honourable member for the honourable parliamentary secretary for the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry has 50 seconds left. Does he want to continue to add?
No, we're on resuming debate.
Oh, we're on resuming debate completely? Okay. I could just see the clock there. Okay. Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure of mine to be the seconder of this motion. And I think that the member has brought forward a vision in which many Canadians hold dear to their heart. Recognizing the value of packaging and labeling and how it is that we can better inform the consumer, I believe is in good part what this motion is about. And I thank the member also for moving forward with the amendment. When you think about it, Madam Speaker, I don't understand why it is people wouldn't support a motion that really wants to provide the opportunity for the consumer to be that much more knowledgeable. What we know, Madam Speaker, is that the people of Canada today want to be more sensitive to our environment and climate change. And legislation or motion that we're talking about today will further the cause of better informing consumers in terms of what it is that they're choosing and how it actually has an impact on our environment, Madam Speaker. And that is the reason why I feel fairly confident in terms of what it is that the member is hoping to be able to accomplish with this particular motion. I specifically look at our younger people, and I think that there's a lot that we can learn by the young people of Canada today as they continue to heighten the expectations of leaders today, of all different political stripes, of different levels of government, and challenging us to move forward. And that is something in which the mover of the motion has done for all members of the House of Commons. By presenting this particular motion, Madam Speaker, what we're really talking about is asking members to recognize the reality, quite frankly, of what our constituents would want us to be looking at, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker. And that is why I believe that the member has done a great service to the House of Commons by allowing for us to be able to participate in a debate which is really a very important debate. And I know that we will get another hour of debate coming up when the motion comes forward, and I look forward to that ongoing discussion on the motion, Madam Speaker. But suffice to say that when we take a look at the climate change, we just had a major announcement from the Minister and the Prime Minister yesterday responding to what it is that Canadians want us to bring forward, whether it's the climate action plan of the government of the day or a motion from a private member on a good initiative that combined or individually, it very much sends a strong message, Madam Speaker. And that is that we are listening and wanting to deliver in tangible ways, in ways in which not only the bigger picture of government, but also the important role that the individuals in society have to play, Madam Speaker. And I look forward to being able to conclude my remarks when the motion comes up for debate next. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Unfortunately, the time is up. The time provided for the consideration of private members' business has now expired, and the order is dropped to the bottom of the order of precedence on the order paper. It being 1:57, this House stands adjourned until next Monday at 11 a.m. pursuant to Standing Order 24-1.